I work nights at a small gas station just outside town. It's the kind of place where silence reigns, broken only by the occasional passing car or the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The store is tiny, just a few aisles with snacks, drinks, and the usual convenience store fare. My job isn't bad. Most shifts are pretty quiet, though sometimes that silence can get strange. This particular night was around 2 a.m., and I was alone on site. Security cameras cover every angle, the pumps, inside the store, and the entire parking lot. Even though nothing typically happens after midnight, I still keep an eye on the monitors out of habit. At 2:05, something bizarre happened. A sudden, intense white light flashed across the parking lot's security feed. It wasn't long, maybe a fraction of a second, but it illuminated everything like midday. What followed was even more peculiar. The timestamp on the footage inexplicably jumped forward 6 minutes, from 2:05 to 2:11. It was as if those 6 minutes simply vanished. I rewound and replayed the tape multiple times. Each attempt yielded the same result. The footage before and after looked completely normal, with no visible glitches. The audio system didn't detect anything unusual. No static, no unexpected sounds. Everything else on the security system functioned perfectly. Wanting to be thorough, I went outside to investigate. The pavement was dry, with no unexpected tire marks or footprints. The pumps stood undisturbed, nothing out of place. Looking up, I saw a clear sky dotted with a few stars, no clouds, no planes or helicopters were visible or audible. Initially, I thought it might be electrical interference or a power surge, but the precision was too perfect. Exactly 6 minutes missing. That detail continued to nag at me, defying any simple explanation. Later, I checked the logs. From the gas station's computer system, something was off. The log was completely empty for that time frame, and the camera showed no cars pulling in or out during those missing 6 minutes. It was like nothing had happened at all. The next day, I told my manager about the incident. He just brushed it off as a tech glitch, saying cameras sometimes mess up, especially older ones. I tried to drop it, but something kept nagging at me. Over the next few nights, I watched the footage from the same camera closely, hoping to catch whatever caused that flash or the missing time. Nothing. No flashes. No jumps. Just the same empty parking lot and quiet nights. A few nights later, around 2 a.m. again, I noticed something else on the video feed. Just outside the frame, near the lot's edge, a shadow moved. I only caught it for a second, like a figure standing still, but it wasn't in any other camera's views. I checked the angle, and it seemed impossible for anyone to be there without being visible from another camera or from outside. I went out and walked the whole perimeter, but there was nothing. No footprints, no signs anyone had been here recently. After that, I started feeling watched during my shifts. Not in a usual way, like someone standing right there, but more like a presence beyond sight. I'd hear noises, small things like a faint rustling or a distant electronic buzz, but when I looked, nothing was around. The night after I saw the shadow on the footage, I decided to sit outside during my break. Maybe I was just going stir-crazy in the store. It was a clear, cold night, and I was leaning against my car, watching the lot. After a while, I noticed a small, dim light flickering in the distance beyond the gas station's property, near the tree line. It wasn't a car or a flashlight, just a steady, blinking white light. I thought maybe someone was camping or doing something back there. So I grabbed my flashlight and walked over, staying close to the lot's edge. The light disappeared as soon as I stepped off the pavement and into the grass. I called out a few times, but no answer. I felt like it was gone before I even got close. I went back to the lot and tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a flashlight from a nearby campsite or some reflection from a distant road, but the whole thing didn't sit right with me. The next day, I pulled the security footage from that night to see if the light showed up on camera. At exactly 2:03:45, a bright flash appeared on the screen, followed by a similar but fainter glow later. The timestamps were inconsistent. Sometimes 6 minutes would vanish, other times 4 or just 2 minutes would go missing between recordings. These jumps always happened at night, specifically in the early morning hours, and only on the camera monitoring the lot. The emptiness after these time jumps was unsettling. Nothing seemed out of place, but the randomness made me uneasy. It wasn't about potential robbery. Something felt fundamentally wrong, like something was manipulating the cameras, and possibly me, just beyond my perception. One night, near closing, A soft hum caught my attention. It wasn't mechanical or vehicle related, but a steady vibration hanging in the air. When I stepped outside to investigate, the sound intensified briefly before disappearing completely. The lot remained unchanged, dark, empty, with only streetlights flickering. During my last shift about a week ago, another flash occurred. A bright white light filled the screen for a second, and the timestamp jumped 6 minutes again. This time something different caught my eye. At the frame's edge, a dark blur moved slowly out of view. I rewound and replayed multiple times. It was subtle, possibly a light trick, but definitely not there before. I left early that night, deeply unsettled. I haven't returned and don't plan to. Whenever I think about those missing minutes and unexplained flashes, a strange feeling overwhelms me. Something was present that I can't explain. Recently, while cleaning my basement, I discovered an old portable hard drive labeled ATC Backup 2002 to 2007 inches. I immediately recognized it. Those recordings confirmed everything I experienced. The flashes, the missing time, the blurry shape. Something was definitely there, and it wasn't just a technical glitch. I worked as an air traffic controller at the regional center just outside Wichita for 27 years before I retired. We had a policy back then where controllers could save radar playback logs for training or error review, and I'd sometimes copy interesting ones to my personal drive. These were unclassified commercial route logs featuring close calls, unusual traffic patterns, and such. At night, mostly out of nostalgia, I plugged in the drive and opened our old playback viewer. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. Little green and yellow blips moving across the screen, each tagged with altitude, squawk code, and call sign. One file caught my attention. Unassigned score 042-9205-344Z. These were random captures the system saved when something triggered a warning but didn't meet incident report criteria. Most were garbage and I almost skipped it. But something made me open it. The display showed a wide-angle view southwest of Wichita. The timestamp read April 29, 2005 at 3:44 Zulu, about 10:44 p.m. local time during a routine night shift. Initially, nothing seemed unusual, just one regional jet climbing through FL 220 heading west with no weather returns or restricted airspace. About 20 seconds into the playback, a tag linked at the top of the screen, FL 700, 70,000 feet. We don't track anything at that altitude. Even high-flying military platforms like U-2s are rare, and they're always well coordinated with squawk codes and escort spacing. This object had no transponder return, just a skin paint, meaning the radar caught a solid object with no identifying information. I zoomed in and froze the image. The return wasn't strong, but it was consistent, showing up on 3 consecutive sweeps. This wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't moving. It just hovered. Then, I realized something strange. The location was directly over the neighborhood where I'd lived at the time. I pulled up a map and confirmed it. The blip sat just east of Clearwater, Kansas, right above the house where we'd lived for 12 years before moving out the next year. It hovered stationary at 70,000 feet for about 14 seconds. Then, without any acceleration curve or directional change, it simply disappeared. No drift, no fade, just gone. Something caught my eye that was gone between one sweep and the next. By itself, this might seem odd, but then a memory surfaced. Back in 2005, sleep eluded me on a Thursday when I was off work. Our son was in high school and had recently started sneaking out at night. I thought I heard the back gate creak, so I got up and looked out the kitchen window. No sign of him. Instead, a strange electrical hum caught my attention, uneven and fading in and out every few seconds. I walked around the house searching for the source. I checked the fridge, thermostat, and even the breaker box. Nothing. I returned to bed, and by morning, the incident had slipped from my mind. Years later, seeing that radar blip brought everything back. I replayed the log dozens of times, trying different filters and playback speeds. The return remained consistent, barely visible, yet distinct. It held an air altitude of 70,000 feet, with an unchanged position. It didn't match any aircraft profile. No scheduled flights existed at that level, and the FAA wouldn't authorize anything in civilian airspace without coordination. I checked the original incident database using the log ID. No notes, no follow-up. Whatever triggered the radar that night never made it into any formal report. An old co-worker who once trained me watched the playback. After viewing it twice, he asked about the return's origin. When I explained, he suggested it might be a reflection from a stray weather balloon. I mentioned the system filters for such things. He nodded and dismissed it. Probably nothing. I didn't press the issue. When you've seen enough strange occurrences, you learn to let some things go. What troubles me is what I discovered later. After finding that log, I reviewed other files. Out of 100, 3 more showed similar blips. Always at 70,000 feet. Always skin paints. Always motionless. Each time, the location was somewhere significant in my past. Near my brother's cabin in Arkansas, close to a hotel where I used to stay during work doubles, and over an old rental house we left in the 90s. These weren't clustered on the same day or year. They were scattered yet connected. The terminal radar in our sector was the only place these returns ever showed up. After checking logs from other overlapping stations, I didn't find anything. The pattern was always the same. Brief return, exact altitude, no ID, no motion. I haven't mentioned this to my family. What would I even say? There's no explanation, and I don't have a theory. The files are still with me, and I'm unsure what to do with them. Most days I don't think about it, but I haven't erased them either. Running has become a habit. Almost every evening after work, I take the same loop through the neighborhood's edge, down, past the nature trail, and back along the golf course path. By 7 or 8, it's quiet, with hardly anyone around. My smartwatch tracks everything: pace, heart rate, GPS, sometimes even audio logs. It helps me unwind. That night wasn't different. Around 8:15, just after sunset, I left home. The sky was still pink, but fading fast. Earlier rain left everything smelling damp and fresh. The air felt cooler than usual. I briefly considered a light jacket, but decided against it. About a mile in, I turned off the sidewalk onto the trail like always. It winds behind houses and then dips into a narrow wooded strip between subdivisions. I know this path intimately. Every bump, every turn. Music played through my earbuds, but not loud. I like hearing my surroundings. It was mostly quiet. A few birds chirped. One car passed on the eastern road. Right before hitting the half-mile mark, I checked my watch. Everything seemed normal. Heart rate in the 130s. Pace slightly slower, but not significantly. Then something strange happened. It was like I blinked and found myself 20 feet ahead, mid-stride, with no memory of the steps that got me there. Something felt off. I stopped and looked around. Same trail, same trees, but an unsettling silence hung in the air. The music had cut out, replaced by static. I pulled out an earbud and listened. Faint static, like a radio not quite tuned in. My watch showed I was paused, not stopped, paused. Here's the rewritten version. Something felt off with my run data. The runtime showed 34 minutes, but I knew that didn't add up. I should have been around 20 minutes in the route. Digging into the run history, I spotted an unusual 12-minute and 17-second pause right in the middle of my trail. I hadn't stopped. I wasn't tired or out of breath. The ground around me was undisturbed, just pine needles and gravel, with no footprints suggesting I had been stationary. Yet the data clearly showed this unexplained pause. My pace slowed as an uneasy feeling crept in. The trees seemed different, closer, taller, or just positioned differently than I remembered. Suddenly, my earbuds went completely silent. The music was still playing on my phone, but no sound came through. I tried pausing, unpausing, skipping tracks. Nothing worked. When I removed the earbuds, the silence was eerie. No bugs, no wind, no birds. Even the highway, which I could usually hear faintly, was absent. I felt intensely watched, not by someone behind me, but by something acutely aware of my presence. I began moving faster, not sprinting, but quickening my pace to distance myself from that unsettling sensation. As I emerged from the trail onto the sidewalk, sounds rushed back abruptly: crickets, distant traffic, a plane overhead. Under a streetlight, I tried to make sense of what happened. I'd randomly recorded the run that night, and when I checked the audio, something bizarre emerged. From the 22-minute to 34-minute mark, there was only static. Not silence, but a low, glitchy hissing with occasional high-pitched pops. The GPS track showed the same strange pause. It was like the recording was trying to process something incomprehensible. I've been running trail cameras on about 60 acres of woods and rocky hills behind my cousin's place in central Pennsylvania for 5 years. I hunt whitetail during the fall, but keep the cameras up year-round to track wildlife movement. Usually it's just coyotes, the occasional black bear, and lots of deer. Nothing too unusual. This happened in early October, 2 seasons ago. I had 3 cameras set up, one near a game trail by a small creek, another on the ridge near a salt lake I made, and a third deeper in the woods near a small clearing where I sometimes sit in the evenings. They're standard, motion-triggered cameras with infrared for night shots, not high-end, but they get the job done. After work on a Thursday, I hiked in to swap out SD cards. Everything looked normal. No signs of people, no trash, no tire tracks near the wood's edge. I always check carefully after a past incident where teenagers tried to throw a party and left beer cans everywhere. That night, everything seemed undisturbed. I did my usual loop. Ridge camera first, then creek, then clearing. It took about an hour and a half and darkness was falling by the time I finished. I didn't notice anything strange until I got home and plugged in the cards. The Ridge camera had nothing at all. No images, not even blurry frames from wind or wildlife. Just a timestamp file and an empty folder labeled IM. The Creek camera was the same. I thought maybe the batteries had died or the cameras were malfunctioning. But the clearing camera was different. It had photos from about a week's worth of footage. Mostly deer, including a big buck I hadn't seen before, moving through just after midnight on the 3rd. Then a raccoon 2 nights later, and then nothing. The little blue line just stops in place for over 12 minutes. Then starts up again like nothing happened. I walked the rest of the way home, checking over my shoulder more times than I'd admit. I didn't feel right until I was back inside with the door locked. I backed up the audio file. I still have it. Every time I listen, I think maybe I'll hear something I missed. But it's just noise, not even rhythmic. Just broken sound. The watch never glitched like that again. I even used the same route, but I haven't taken that trail at night since. Not alone. Movement had occurred for 2 nights. On the 3rd night, an image was captured precisely at 3:11 a.m. The photo was far from crisp. Rainy and overexposed, it seemed like the camera's sensor had been overwhelmed by intense light. Despite the poor quality, certain details were discernible. Pine trees and saplings populated the background and foreground, yet something peculiar hung suspended between them, a shape defying easy categorization. It wasn't round like a flashlight or angular like car headlights. Instead, it appeared lopsided with an odd, misty texture. The edges seemed hazy, while the center blazed too brightly to examine closely. No recognizable animal or human form occupied the frame. Just this strange silhouette amid the trees. Afterward, silence. The next timestamp emerged 5 days later, suggesting a potential technical glitch, perhaps an unexpected lightning strike, but the weather had been consistently clear, and the camera boasted a brand new battery that I'd personally installed. Driven by curiosity, I returned to investigate. With a flashlight, I examined the location thoroughly. The trees stood undisturbed. No scorch marks, no broken branches, no trampled undergrowth. I even climbed the nearby tree stand for a comprehensive aerial view. Everything appeared completely normal. I repositioned the camera with a fresh memory card and added a battery-powered audio recorder at the tree's base. Initially skeptical, I anticipated nothing unusual. A few nights later, I hiked back on a Saturday, planning a quick retrieval. Halfway through the journey, an unsettling sensation descended. Not quite feeling watched, but sensing an unnatural stillness. The absolute silence struck me. No bird calls, no insect sounds. My pace slowed instinctively. The flashlight began flickering, then steadied after a tap, only to extinguish completely upon reaching the clearing. Standing in darkness, I could still discern tree silhouettes. Familiar with the terrain, I carefully retrieved the camera's SD card. When reaching for the audio recorder, I noticed its recording indicator light was inexplicably off. Something wasn't right. Where's inexplicably off? Something wasn't right. We were up near Donner Pass early October. Me and my friend Tyler. We'd planned a lightweight backpacking trip, nothing too intense. Just far enough from the highway that you could pretend civilization didn't exist for a while. It was a Thursday when we headed out, and there wasn't anyone else parked at the trailhead when we got there. That's part of why we picked it. The first day was normal. Cool weather, clear skies, good trail conditions. We hiked maybe 5 miles in before setting up camp near this little clearing just below a ridge. It wasn't an official site, but it was flat and dry, and there was a good spot to hang the bear bag, so we figured it was fine. That first night we ate freeze-dried chili, talked for a bit, then turned in around 10 o'clock. I got colder than I expected. I kept waking up every hour or so just to shift around in my bag, trying to warm my feet back up. Tyler slept like a rock. At some point, maybe around 3 o'clock or 4 in the morning, I remember lying there half awake, hearing this faint popping sound, not like branches breaking, more like distant static or that weird crackling you get when a campfire is dying out. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. I sat up for a minute, trying to figure out if it was something real or just in my head, but then it stopped. Later, I started investigating what happened that night. I checked my equipment, and something strange was going on. The switch, nothing. I checked the battery, dead. I was sure I'd put in a fresh battery when I left. Lithium batteries are supposed to last 10 days. I headed back, didn't hang around. The flashlight came back on about 5 minutes into the walk. At home, the SD card was completely blank. No, a single file. Same with the audio recorder. Once I replaced the batteries, it powered on fine, but it didn't save anything. No static, no ambient sound, just blank. Over the next couple weeks, I tried a few more setups, different cameras, even brought one of those cheap night vision monoculars and sat out there myself. One evening, but nothing happened. No weird lights, no missing data. Everything worked normally again, like whatever it was had moved on. I still have the one photo. I printed it out and looked at it in different lights. Tried scanning it, adjusting contrast, all that. The shape's still unrecognizable. It's just this hovering brightness tucked between the trees, slightly off-center, like it wasn't meant to be seen directly. I haven't caught anything like it since. The cameras go off like normal. Deer, foxes, the occasional owl, but I keep checking every season. Same clearing, same tree. Always around 3 a.m., just in case. Something felt off. The sky was cloudy, which seemed strange since the forecast had promised clear weather. The air felt heavy, like it was about to storm, but no rain ever came. While packing up, Tyler spotted something unusual. About 15 feet from our tent near the edge, he called me over. A trail of boot prints marked the dirt, clear and recent tracks coming from the trees. They matched my boot tread perfectly, with spacing and depth that seemed right. These tracks led straight to our tent. But here was the weird part. There were no return tracks. I initially thought maybe I'd wandered out at night to relieve myself and just forgotten. But a quick check of my pants showed nothing. No signs I'd been outside. Tyler confirmed the same, absolutely certain he hadn't gotten up once. We followed the tracks back into the trees. About 30 feet in, they simply stopped. It was like whoever made them had walked in a straight line from the forest's edge to the tent and then just vanished. No broken branches, no disturbed dirt beyond that point. Just nothing. The feeling this gave me was hard to describe. We hadn't seen anything obviously threatening, but the idea that someone or something had been walking around our tent at night without leaving a trace, that messed with my head. Tyler went quiet after that. Usually he's the one cracking jokes and talking constantly, but for the next few hours he barely spoke a word. When I suggested hiking out early, he declined. He wanted to finish the trip and maybe camp at a different site the next night. So we continued, hiking another 4 miles deeper into the woods and climbing to a higher ridge with more open views. The trail was tougher with more switchbacks, but moving helped us both feel better. Our second campsite was smaller, surrounded by thick trees, no open clearing this time. We set up just off the trail. I kept checking the ground near the tent, looking for tracks, but saw only our own paths between the firing and our bags. That night, we made pasta and started talking normally again, reminiscing about high school bands and weird teachers. I began to feel like the first night had been just a strange, one-off occurrence. Maybe a trick of light or an animal leaving oddly shaped prints. Then, around 3 a.m. I woke up again, half awake, cold and uncomfortable. But this time, something else was different. A low sound, not quite a thump, but a deep vibration just at the edge of hearing. It came and went, almost like it was pulsing through the air. I was driving back from a job site in southern Illinois about 3 hours from home on a Tuesday night in late September 2 years ago. Usually I'd stay overnight when I'm out that far, but I'd wrapped up earlier than expected and decided to make the drive. I didn't want to waste the next morning packing up a motel room. The back roads were my usual route, mostly because I can't stand the interstate at night. Too many semis and blown-out headlights. So, I was on this stretch of 2-lane highway cutting through farmland somewhere between Clay and Richland counties. Not much out here except fields, tree lines, and the occasional barn or silo way off in the distance. It was around 10:30 p.m. The sky was clear. No moon, just stars. I remember that because I'd been staring at them at a stop sign earlier, trying to keep myself awake. I wasn't tired exactly, just zoning out a little. It had been a long day. There was no traffic in either direction. I hadn't seen another car in probably 20 minutes. No houses nearby either. Just an old fence running along the left side of the road and open fields beyond that. I'd just passed a small gravel turnout where the tree line pulled back and left a wide patch of open grass. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a headlight through the trees, like maybe a tractor or ATV on the other side of the field, but it was too bright for that and too high. It was a glowing ball, maybe the size of a beach ball. Hard to say because of the distance, just hovering a couple feet above the ground. Pale white light, no blinking, no flicker. The edges were soft, like it was glowing from within. Instead of casting light around it, it rose slowly. Later, during a camping trip, something similar happened. There was wind pushing through the trees, but when I held my breath and listened, the branches weren't moving. I lasted maybe 10 or 15 seconds, then faded out. I turned to ask Tyler if he heard it, but he was out cold. I sat there in my sleeping bag, not moving for a long time, just listening. Nothing else happened. In the morning, the clouds were gone, and the sky looked normal again. We packed up quietly and started the hike back. Neither of us brought up the sound or the footprints. We didn't have to. Back at the car, we both checked our boots again, just to be sure. Same tread as the prints we saw, but that only made it worse, because if it was one of us, we'd remember. And if it wasn't, there weren't any other vehicles at the trailhead when we got back. No hikers passed us on the way out, just us and the woods. I was driving on a familiar road during the second week of July, right in the middle of one of those sticky heat waves that make everything feel heavier. We live about 10 minutes outside of town, not fully rural, but distant enough. I was moving slowly, with no particular urgency, almost like I didn't care I was even there. The sphere appeared without warning. It climbed steadily upward, leveling off with the tops of utility poles running alongside the road. No sound, just the faint hum of my engine and the wind. Then it drifted toward the road itself, right over my lane, and stopped. I'd already slowed down by then, coasting to a halt without consciously touching the brake. Suspended about 30 feet in front of my car, right above the center line, the object hung motionless. My high beams were on, but they didn't seem to affect it. The light didn't glare or reflect. It just existed, as if it wasn't part of the same physical space. I watched it for maybe 10 seconds, completely still. Then, without any build-up or warning, it shot straight up. No arc, no gradual acceleration, no sound, just an instant vertical climb until it vanished from view. I craned my neck, trying to track its movement, but it disappeared so quickly I couldn't follow. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. That part really unnerved me. I've seen plenty of fast-moving objects, fireworks, flares, jets at air shows, but nothing moves like this. Nothing goes from a complete stop to completely gone without any acceleration or noise. I sat in the middle of the road, my dome light timing out and the dashboard going dim. I kept looking out the window and up at the sky, half expecting it to return, but it didn't. Eventually, I started driving again. The rest of the road was empty, passing a few fields and old barns that blended into the landscape. When I hit the next town, I pulled into a gas station and just sat in the parking lot for a while. I didn't tell anyone about it. What would I even say? A few days later, I drove back out to the same spot during daylight. I parked at the turnout and walked into the field looking for any signs, but there was nothing, no burnt grass, no broken branches, just a patch of scrubby grass and dry weeds. I still drive that road sometimes when heading downstate. Part of me hopes I'll see it again, but I never have. One sphere, one road, one silent exit straight up into the sky. That was the only time. The night was dark and quiet, with few streetlights, surrounded by trees. Our house sits at the edge of a long field, beyond which lies only woods. A storm rolled through that night, not a major one, just a quick-moving line of thunderstorms that knocked out the power around 9:30. There was no wind damage or fallen trees, just flickering lights that went out completely. We lit some candles and opened the windows to let the air in. Our little family, me, my husband Greg, and our 10-year-old daughter Natalie were downstairs in the living room, casually talking and half listening to the rain. The house felt strange without the background hum of electricity. By 10:15 the storm had mostly passed, leaving only a light drizzle. Curiosity led me to the front porch with a flashlight, checking the fuse box even though I knew that wasn't the issue. Everything seemed normal. Standing outside, I watched the sky. It was low and overcast, with clouds beginning to thin in places. The moon lurked behind them, casting everything in a pale, flat light. That's when I noticed it, a strange light behind the clouds. At first, I thought it might be lightning, but this glow was steady. It moved slowly across the sky, unlike any plane. No blinking, no sound, just a whitish flicker, partially obscured by clouds. Then it stopped completely. As I continued watching, the clouds shifted slightly. For a brief moment, I could see a soft, circular glow, about the size of a quarter at arm's length. It was too low and too slow to be a plane, and completely silent. I called Greg out to look. He stood beside me, squinting upward. I deliberately said nothing, wanting to hear his uninfluenced observation. After a few seconds, he asked, "Is it moving?" The light drifted sideways slowly, then halted again. Natalie joined us. To keep her calm, Greg casually mentioned it might be a drone. But we both knew it wasn't. Wrong altitude, wrong movement, wrong silence. We watched as it suddenly moved straight up about 20 or 30 feet before stopping once more. The light drifted and dropped, moving with an unnatural precision. First, it descended diagonally, faster than anything I'd seen before, then stopped at perfect 90-degree angles. Up, stop, left, stop, down, stop, like it was scanning or watching something. I grabbed the old binoculars from the bookshelf, hoping they might help. By the time I returned, the light had shifted westward toward the tree line behind our house. Through the lens, it flickered oddly. Here 1 second, vanished the next, then reappearing a few feet away. It wasn't pulsing exactly, but seemed to go in and out behind something, though the clouds weren't thick enough to hide anything completely. The light began to drift lower, first slowly, then faster, dropping until it hovered right over the treetops. Its glow faintly illuminated the branch tops, making the trees' shapes just visible. We all stepped back silently. Something felt wrong, too close, too intimate. For a brief moment, I could have sworn it was looking back at us. I've lived here a long time. We've seen weather balloons, strange reflections, low-flying planes from the nearby airbase, but this was different. Its movement, its silence, nothing matched anything familiar. For maybe 10 seconds it hovered. Then, without warning, it shot straight up, not like a typical flight, but as if pulled by an invisible force. 1 second over the trees, the next halfway up the sky, then gone. No trail, no sound. The clouds remained softly lit for a couple seconds, the glow gradually fading. Absolute stillness followed. No crickets, no wind. Eventually, Natalie asked if we could go inside. We agreed. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, the power returned. I heard the fridge restart and the living room light buzz back to life. The next day, we hardly discussed it. We knew we'd seen something strange, but had no idea what to do. We checked the news. Nothing. Nothing. I was out at Lake Hartwell one night, just a little ways off the dock behind my cousin's cabin. It was early October, maybe mid-60s out, pretty still with barely a breeze. I'd normally fish here with others, but that night I was alone. My cousin and his wife had gone into town, and I didn't feel like tagging along. I wanted some quiet. Around 8:30 I walked down the path to the water with a folding chair, tackle box, and a flashlight strapped to my head. I'd brought a thermos of coffee, though I barely touched it. The night felt unusually hollow, not in a bad way, just incredibly quiet. Even the insects weren't making much noise. I set up on a small gravel stretch to the right of the dock and cast out, not expecting much. The moon phase wasn't great for catfish, and I didn't get a single nibble, but I didn't mind. It was nice to be alone. Sometime around 9:45, I noticed something strange about the water. The moon was out, with just enough clouds moving to create surface changes. But this was different. It looked like the water was reflecting a faint, dull light moving underneath. At first, I thought maybe another boat was nearby, but I heard no engine. I stood up and looked around. Nothing. No navigation lights, no oars, no voices, just this soft pale light shifting beneath the surface about 2030 feet out. It wasn't bright, more like a shimmering effect similar to headlights through fog, but lower and without rippling like a typical flashlight beam. It moved incredibly slowly. I watched for probably a full minute, waiting for something to make sense. Then 2 more lights appeared, fading into view. One to the left of the first, another to the right. They weren't in a straight line but formed a triangle maybe 15 or 20 feet across. All 3 hovered at the same depth. What struck me most was how fixed they were. I couldn't see anything solid connecting them, but they stayed in position as if attached to something. The water around them moved slightly, but the lights didn't shift or rock. They just stayed there. We haven't seen anything like this since. But on clear nights, I find myself looking up more than I used to. I stood by the lake, completely still, about 6 feet below the surface. My gaze was fixed, unmoving. No headlamp, no sudden movements. Something wasn't right. After 2 minutes of silent observation, I finally switched on my headlamp and aimed the beam directly at the lights. Instantly, they vanished, not fading or drifting, just gone the moment the light touched them. The water looked completely normal again. No glow, no distortion, no sound. I scanned the area, checking if anyone else might be around, but everything was dead quiet. I remained there for 10 or 15 minutes, just watching. Fishing was no longer on my mind. At some point, I turned off my headlamp, hoping the lights might return in darkness. They didn't. My watch read 10:12, a time that would stick in my memory. Walking back to the cabin, an unsettling feeling followed me. It wasn't the woods watching, but something beneath the lake's surface. My cousin and his wife were out, so I sat on the porch facing the water. From this distance, I could see nothing unusual. Those lights haunted me, how perfectly they had held their shape, motionless. That night, sleep evaded me. Small splashes seemed to echo, even with closed windows. The next morning, I returned in daylight. The lake looked completely normal. No trace of the previous night's strange phenomenon. No boats, no trash, not even fish. I stood there a long time, trying to understand how something could glow underwater and leave no evidence. I haven't fished alone at that lake since. Later, around 2 a.m., humming sound woke me, not loud but steady, like an electrical box or a phone vibrating against a table, but deeper, almost as if coming through the walls. Living outside of town, nights are usually quiet. No traffic, no nearby neighbors. Initially, I thought it might be the fridge or the HVAC fan cycling strangely. The hum was unlike anything I'd heard before. It wasn't coming from inside the house, but seemed to surround the entire place. Low, wide, and steady. I walked into the kitchen and looked out the back window. Everything appeared normal, just dark. The porch light was off, but moonlight illuminated the tree line. No animals, no wind, nothing moving. When I checked the stove and microwave clocks, both showed 2008. This struck me as odd since I had reset them just days earlier after a power flicker during a storm. They usually weren't this synchronized. My phone, charging on the kitchen counter, was frozen on the lock screen, also displaying 208. I tapped the screen, pressed the power button, nothing happened. Something felt off. My body moved differently, slightly delayed, like standing up too quickly and getting lightheaded. The humming remained constant. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and stepped onto the porch, but it flickered and died immediately, despite having fresh batteries recently. The porch light wouldn't turn on either. Outside, the hum was fuller, as if the air itself was vibrating. My chest felt strange. Breathing was possible, but harder, reminiscent of that dull pressure you feel in a plane before your ears pop. Wanting to understand what was happening, I decided to check my car. The dome light glowed dimly when I opened the door. Sitting in the driver's seat, I turned the key. Silence. No cranking, no clicking. The dashboard clock also read 208. At that moment, genuine fear replaced my previous confusion. 3 separate devices showing the exact same frozen time made my stomach drop, transforming an odd experience into something genuinely unsettling. I woke up around 4 a.m., my usual time, and glanced out the window of the little room above the barn. The ranch was eerily quiet, that kind of silence that weighs heavy after a long day of work and noise. Something felt different. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe the early hour was playing tricks on me. Down in the pasture, my cattle were lined up perfectly, all facing the same direction. While they sometimes cluster, this was unusual. They weren't grazing or moving, just standing completely still, heads raised, staring intensely toward the far edge of the field. I'd never seen them behave like this, all synchronized. I grabbed my coat and boots and stepped outside. The air was cold and dry, the sky dark but clear, with razor-sharp stars. No coyotes, no sounds, just the low whisper of wind threading through the fences. Pulling out my flashlight, I walked toward the cattle. They remained motionless, fixed in their collective gaze. Later, back at the house, everything felt strange. The windows were dark, but not naturally, more like covered in a weird tinted film. The light wasn't reflecting correctly. Then the humming started changing. It didn't get louder or softer, just shifted subtly, like someone barely turning a radio dial. The sound dropped and I could feel a vibration in my jawbone. Suddenly, everything went completely silent. No hum, no insects, no breeze, dead quiet. I looked down at the dashboard clock and blinked once. When I looked again, it had ticked to 209. My phone lit up normally, unlocked. Kitchen lights were on when I went inside. The stove and microwave clocks both read 209, having moved forward simultaneously. The flashlight worked perfectly. The fridge compressor kicked in normally. I opened the back door. Crickets were chirping again, trees moving slightly in a breeze. The hum never returned. I spent the rest of the night walking around, checking everything. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I examined the car. It started fine. The clock was accurate, phone showed no issues, battery full, no error messages. But I know what I saw. Everything froze at exactly 208 and stayed that way. For how long, I can't say. It could have been seconds or much longer. Time didn't pass normally. I never heard that hum again. The cattle stood perfectly still, staring intently at a scorched patch of earth about 30 feet across. I knew this ground well, and I was certain this burned area wasn't here earlier that day. Just hours before dark, I'd walked the entire pasture and seen nothing like this. The circle was unnaturally perfect. Clean edges that looked almost deliberately drawn, as if someone had traced a massive metal ring and burned everything inside. When I knelt down, the ground felt warm but not hot. Something felt off. Looking up, the sky was clear, just stars and a thin sliver of moon casting minimal light. My flashlight illuminated the bizarre burn mark while the surrounding field remained dark. Suddenly, my dog barked from somewhere behind me. When I turned, nothing was there. The barking stopped almost instantly. This was strange. My dog usually stays close when we're out at night. I headed to the barn to grab a better light and maybe my rifle just in case. My phone was completely dead. Not just low battery, but totally unresponsive. Same with my truck. When I tried starting it, the dashboard lights flickered and went out. A low, steady hum hung in the air, barely audible like a distant generator, but no power lines were anywhere nearby. The vibration seemed to pulse through ground and air. The cattle remained fixed, now huddled closer together, almost blocking the path to the scorched circle. I felt watched, not just by the cattle, but by something just beyond the dark brush line. When I spun around and shined my light, I saw nothing, but the sensation of being observed was unmistakable. It was just after 4:15, and everything felt unnervingly still. Out in the middle of nowhere, about an hour east of Barstow, Greg and I were camping on a dry lake bed we knew well. No people, no lights, just miles of flat ground and scrub brush. The kind of place where the sky swallows darkness whole, breaks into astrophotography, and I just enjoy the quiet. We arrived around 9:30, set up camp, and cracked open a couple beers. The temperature was mild, maybe low 60s, with no wind, just that still desert air. A little Bluetooth speaker played softly, low enough that we could still hear the night sounds. Coyotes, the occasional owl. Normal stuff, Greg had his camera and tripod set up about 10 feet from the fire pit, pointing straight up. By midnight, we were lying back in the truck bed watching satellites pass overhead. You get used to their movement, how they track across the sky. Suddenly, everything changed. My heart started beating faster. I didn't want to stay out there, but I also didn't want to leave the cattle behaving so strangely. I sat in the truck, keeping my light trained on a strange circle of scorched earth. The steady hum filled the air. It smelled faintly metallic, like rust or something burning, but not on fire. After what felt like an hour, though it was probably just 20 minutes, the circle began to change. The ground seemed to shimmer like heat rising on pavement, but it wasn't a heat haze. The surface was rippling, bending light around it. The cattle shifted back, their heads locked on that spot. The hum grew louder, more intense. I noticed the stars above dimming, but not gradually. Just the patch of sky above the circle was darkening, like a shadow moving over the stars. That feeling of being watched returned, stronger, something just out of sight, waiting. Then the scorched earth started to glow. Not bright, but a dull orange light that pulsed slowly, as if breathing. I blinked, and it was gone. The ground looked normal again. The hum stopped. Stars winked back like nothing had happened. The cattle broke their stare and began moving, lowing softly as if waking from a long trance. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I got in my truck, which started fine this time, and drove home. On the way, I checked my phone, still dead. When I got home, I plugged it in and it powered up normally, showing a full battery and all notifications. I don't know what that patch of earth was or why the cattle acted that way. I just know what I saw, and it's been on my mind ever since. We spotted a dozen different planes that night, blinking and humming along their usual paths. Then something else caught our attention. At first, it looked like just another satellite. A bright white point of light at the same altitude. We didn't speak immediately. Then it slowed down and came to a complete stop in the middle of the sky. Greg sat up. "You seeing that?" "Yeah, we were both watching." It hovered completely still. No blinking, no noise, no movement. Then it started rotating in a way that's hard to describe. The point of light remained fixed, but you could tell something behind it was turning. Faint darker shapes moved around it, like arms or fins catching starlight at weird angles. It rotated slowly, similar to a repositioning satellite dish. Completely silent. Greg tried to capture it with a long exposure, but his camera kept freezing. Every time he hit the shutter, the entire device would lock up. Screen dead, buttons unresponsive. As soon as the light started rotating, his equipment stopped working. He thought it might be a battery issue and swapped it out, but nothing changed. That's when I started feeling strange. Not scared, exactly, but hyper-aware. Like suddenly realizing you've been watched without knowing it. I scanned the horizon, empty, dead still. The light continued turning, then paused. What happened next is hard to explain. It darted left, instant, sharp, like dragging something across a screen. No arc, no acceleration. Then it stopped, hovered, moved up. 100. Same speed, same sharpness. It repeated this several times, always in straight lines. Repositioning maybe 50 meters up. Impossible to judge its actual size. Greg looked pale, muttering something I couldn't hear. He seemed ready to pack up and leave. Suddenly, all night sounds vanished. 1 second, background noise was there. The next, complete silence. No wind, no rustling, not even speaker static. I found myself standing though I hadn't meant to move. My drone flights had become a routine escape from work and daily life. Most days I'd fly around the edges of the small forest near my place, capturing shots of treetops and the creek cutting through the valley. It was relaxing, a way to focus on something different. That particular day was clear with no wind. I set the drone up and let it climb higher than usual to get a better view. Through my phone's live feed, I watched the small quadcopter grow smaller against the blue sky. Suddenly, something strange happened. The drone stopped dead in mid-air, not with its usual smooth hover, but as if it had hit an invisible wall right in front of it. I tried steering it with the controls, but it wouldn't respond. The drone just hung motionless for about 2 seconds. Then the video feed started to glitch, pixelating like a bad TV signal, before it crashed. It dropped straight down, hitting the ground with a loud thud in a nearby clearing. Hurrying over, I was annoyed but curious about what had happened. This wasn't like my previous drone experiences. Later, with Greg, we had an even stranger encounter. My hands were sweating, my mouth dry as we watched something inexplicable. A light descended perfectly, a mile straight down, then stopped and hovered without rotating. We backed toward the truck, not driving, just sitting. Greg would glance at it periodically, looking away as if it hurt to watch. After a minute, the light moved again, this time slower. It drifted north along the horizon, still silent and without blinking, until it faded behind distant hills. Suddenly, sound returned, crickets, wind, the low hum of the cooler's battery pack. Greg's camera powered back on normally. Previous photos were intact, but those taken during the light's movement were completely black. We didn't talk much afterward. We stayed another hour in silence, then left before dawn. Back home, I checked the GPS. It showed a weird route deviation near the lake bed, as if we'd veered off-road for a few hundred feet before returning. But I knew we hadn't moved the truck at all. We haven't been back to that spot since. I went out flying my drone, mostly curious since I had never done anything like this before. The next day, I went back to the spot where it crashed, searching all around for anything out of the ordinary, scorch marks, disturbed earth, footprints, something, anything. But there was nothing. When I picked it up and turned it on again, the camera feed saved the last few seconds before the crash. That's when I saw it. Right before impact, the camera caught something weird. A perfect sphere of light just floating there, completely still, right where the drone had stopped. It wasn't moving or blinking like a drone's light or a plane, just a smooth, solid-looking orb of white light. It filled most of the frame, maybe 4 or 5 across, just hovering. I rewound the clip over and over, trying to see if I'd missed something. The light was definitely there, no doubt about it. It didn't look natural, but it also didn't seem like any light source I knew. No flickering, no color changes, no shape shifts, just that perfect sphere. What got me was how the drone seemed to hit an invisible barrier, like it tried to fly through the sphere and was stopped by it. But when I looked for the sphere with my eyes after the crash, there was nothing. No light, no fog, nothing out of place in that clearing. Just trees, grass, and a broken drone. A few days later, I checked the footage again and noticed something else weird. When the drone was flying normally, the feed was smooth, but right before it hit the sphere, the audio cut out completely. No background noise, no wind, no chirping birds, just silence like the drone's microphone had been turned off. I tried flying the drone in the same area again, but nothing happened. No invisible walls, no spheres of light, just normal flights. Still, I can't explain what I saw that day. It wasn't a bird or a balloon. It was too perfect. Sometimes I think about how the drone just stopped like that, as if something didn't want it to go any further. I never felt like I was in danger, but that moment made me uneasy. Like whatever it was watching and controlling things in a way I couldn't see. I keep the drone stored away now, only take it out when I feel ready to deal with whatever else might be out there. The footage is saved on my hard drive. I watch it sometimes trying to figure it out, but the sphere stays a mystery. Just a perfect silent ball of light that blocked my drone's path and vanished without a trace. I woke up to an odd sensation, the engine's steady hum and street lights faintly glowing outside my car window. My head was pounding and a heavy weight pressed across my chest. After blinking several times to clear my foggy brain, I realized I was sitting in my car parked perfectly beside a quiet stretch of road, far from any city lights. The dashboard clock read 2:18 a.m. I knew I'd been driving earlier, but something felt off. How did I get here? My memory was a blank slate. The last clear recollection was listening to a podcast on the highway, and then nothing. The engine was still running, the radio silent. I checked the gear shift, parked, doors locked. Outside, the road was completely empty. No other vehicles, no signs of life. When I stepped out to stretch, the cool air carried scents of wet asphalt and pine. Looking down the road in both directions revealed only dark trees lining the highway. No houses, no civilization. A sense of unease crept over me. I'd pulled over to rest during long drives before, sometimes blanking out from exhaustion. But this felt different. Why was the car still running? Why couldn't I remember stopping? As I pulled back onto the road, something caught my eye in the side mirror. A strange blinking white light hovering above the treetops. It wasn't a car, too high, too steady. The light blinked like a beacon, consistently positioned just beyond the road's edge. Every time I glanced back, the light remained. When I looked ahead, the road was empty. I tried rationalizing it as a reflection or marker light, but something felt wrong. The steady, unmoving blink unsettled me. I slowed down, attempting to get a better look. I even tried photographing it with my phone, but each attempt resulted in a completely black screen. That's when a chill ran down my spine. Something about this light was decidedly not normal, and I was out driving late at night when something felt wrong. The silence was complete. No typical sounds like helicopters or airplanes, just a steady blinking light. As I drove, this light stayed with me, always hovering just behind the trees on the right side. After about 10 minutes, it vanished suddenly, 1 second present, the next completely gone. I carefully checked my mirrors, but saw no other cars or lights. Minutes later, a strange sensation crept into my head. It felt like a low-frequency vibration that wasn't painful, but made me dizzy and disoriented. I pulled over, fully stopping and switching off the engine. The car was silent, except for a faint wind outside. While trying to clear my head, I noticed something odd. The radio, which I'd left off, was now playing static at a low volume. I hadn't touched it. The volume seemed to be turning itself on slowly, almost imperceptibly. When I reached to switch it off, the radio cut out on its own before my hand even touched the dial. This freaked me out more than the earlier blinking light. The car no longer felt like my own instead. It seemed like a strange space I was trapped inside. My phone still wouldn't turn on when I tried to call someone. Taking a deep breath, I decided to get back on the road and head home. During the drive, the stars above looked unusually bright. They seemed to shift slightly when I looked away and back, moving in patterns I couldn't comprehend. A hard blink returned them to normal, but the feeling that something was off remained. When I finally arrived home and checked my watch, I realized nearly an hour had passed. With gaps in my memory I couldn't explain. The car's mileage showed I'd driven farther than I remembered, and the road felt unfamiliar, as if I'd taken a different route without realizing it. What happened that night remains a mystery. The blinking light, the missing memories, the radio turning itself on, all of it suggested something was present, just beyond my understanding. I keep replaying the events, trying to make sense of them, but they don't add up. Maybe they never will. I was sitting in my living room, a handheld radio and cheap antenna my only companions, while the city slumbered outside. It was around midnight when I started scanning through the dead zones, those eerie stretches of radio frequency where usually nothing happens, just static and silence that make you wonder if the device is even working. That's when I caught something unusual. This wasn't a voice or music, but a repeating pattern of sounds almost like Morse code, yet distinctly different. I adjusted the squelch and volume, listening carefully. The sequence repeated every half minute, mechanical and precise, like a machine attempting communication but not quite speaking a recognizable language. Short bursts of clicks and pulses were arranged in a way that suggested intentional meaning. I tried recording it on my phone, though the audio quality wasn't great. Playing it back, I tried to decode something familiar, but nothing made sense. The sequence looped endlessly, maintaining a consistent rhythm. Out of curiosity, I ran the recording through a Morse translator app, which only produced random letters, no coherent words. Over the next hour, the pattern persisted, unchanged. I even explored nearby frequencies, wondering if it might be interference or some elaborate prank, but the signal remained locked onto that specific dead channel, cutting through static with unnatural clarity. Something odd began happening with my radio equipment. The usual low electrical background hum started to fade, almost as if the device was deliberately quieting itself to let this signal come through. This was especially strange, given my radio's typically noisy nature. A creeping chill ran through me. I felt like I was hearing something unintended. I got up to check the antenna on the balcony, wanting to ensure nothing was loose or causing interference. When I returned, the radio had gone completely silent except for the pattern itself, pure and steady, without any background noise. Sitting back down, I tried to rationalize what I was experiencing. Then I noticed something bizarre. The wall clock was off by exactly 6 minutes. I was certain I'd been listening for an hour, yet somehow only a few minutes had passed. Checking the timestamp on my phone, recording confirmed the same anomaly. 6 minutes had vanished from the middle of the recording with no apparent break or technical glitch. I was driving home with Sarah late one Saturday night. The highway stretched out empty, nothing but the hum of our car's engine and tires on asphalt. We traveled this route countless times before, so everything felt familiar. About 20 minutes into the drive, Sarah broke the silence. "Hey, do you see that light?" she asked, pointing out her window. At first I didn't see anything in the rearview mirror. Then I caught it. A small, blinking light hovering low and close, moving at exactly our speed. It wasn't like a typical emergency vehicle or police car. Instead, the light blinked steadily, once every few seconds, rhythmic and strange. Weirdly, it seemed visible only from the driver's side window. When I checked the side and rear view mirrors, the light vanished. Sarah confirmed she saw the same thing. Initially, I thought it might be a reflection from a road sign or distant radio tower, but something felt off. The light maintained its distance behind us, matching our pace perfectly. Every time I looked, it blinked. I grabbed the dash cam from the glove box, a device I'd rarely used before, and pointed it out the windshield. We continued driving, and the mysterious light stayed with us, never changing its position or speed. This wasn't the first strange experience I'd had with unexplained signals. Earlier, I'd gone outside for fresh air and noticed the streetlights flickering briefly. The entire block dimmed momentarily before returning to normal. Later, a radio pattern I'd been listening to suddenly cut out, replaced by static. For a week afterward, I scanned the frequency nightly but heard nothing. My equipment worked fine, yet the incident remained unexplained. The pattern, the silence, the missing minutes, none of it made sense. The signal felt like a ghost frequency, stuck in my memory, haunting me with its mysterious presence. The night was dark and the highway stretched out before us, empty except for our headlights. The strange white light caught my attention, blinking steadily just off to the side. Sarah noticed it too, her curiosity mixed with a hint of nervousness. I adjusted my speed, testing the light's behavior. Whether I slowed down or sped up, it matched my pace perfectly. The rhythmic blink remained constant, always just at the edge of my vision. Road signs passed by, but nothing else broke the darkness around us. Every mirror check revealed nothing. The light seemed to hover just out of reflection range, always present but never directly visible. About 20 minutes into our journey, its behavior remained unchanged, a single white dot blinking with unwavering consistency. At a rest stop, I checked the dashcam. The grainy footage confirmed what I'd seen, a light hovering around car roof height, moving smoothly alongside us. Sarah stayed quiet, visibly unsettled. I attempted to lighten the mood with a joke about new technology or a prank, but something felt off. 15 more minutes passed with the light trailing us. Then, suddenly, it vanished. No gradual fade, no warning, just complete disappearance. We scanned everywhere. Mirrors, windows, but found nothing. The next day, reviewing the footage brought no answers. The light was undeniably there, yet inexplicable. Friends dismissed my story, suggesting it was a trick of perspective or a windshield reflection, but I knew differently. This wasn't a camera glitch. The blinking was too precise, its movement too deliberate. One night, one unexplained light, following silently but never appearing where a normal object would. Months earlier, a similar experience had happened during a solo mountain hike. Around midnight, in a small clearing beneath an impossibly clear sky, something had caught my attention. The bright stars offered no explanation for the strange encounter. The mystery remains. No similar sightings before or since. Just that single, inexplicable moment of a light that shouldn't exist, moving in ways that defy rational explanation. I was out in the forest alone, watching the night sky, the constellations I loved. Orion, the Big Dipper, suddenly felt different. Not dramatically so, just subtly wrong. At first, I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. The stars seemed to shift, but incredibly slowly. This wasn't like the normal rotation of the Earth. It felt like the star patterns themselves were sliding sideways. Every time I blinked, the stars would snap back to their original positions. Then, when I'd look again, they'd start drifting once more. I sat there for about 5 minutes, watching this strange phenomenon. The movement was so subtle that I might have doubted it, except it kept happening. Each time I opened my eyes, the stars would begin their slow, weird slide across the sky. It was as if the world was breathing, but through the stars rather than air or trees. Unease started creeping in. The forest was silent except for distant animal rustlings. I kept looking around, expecting to see something in the shadows, but nothing was there. My phone showed 12:15, but the battery was low and I had no signal. Not unusual out here, but adding to the growing strangeness. As I packed up and started walking back down the trail, the star shifting continued. I'd catch glimpses of it, always disappearing when I blinked, always returning when I looked. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. I'd stop and listen, but heard only trees and night sounds. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, the shadows seemed to flicker oddly, like something wasn't quite right. I found myself blinking more than usual, unsure if it was fatigue or something affecting my vision. After about an hour, the trees thinned and I could see town lights in the distance, a welcome sight of normalcy. I started late on a Thursday night, sitting on my front porch smoking a cigarette, trying to wind down after a long day. One of those nights where everything feels still, like the whole neighborhood is holding its breath. I'd just finished talking to my girlfriend when I noticed something odd above the houses at the end of our cul-de-sac. A huge dark shape was hovering just above the tree line. At first, I thought it was a drone or maybe a low-flying helicopter, but it made absolutely no sound. None. Not even the faintest hum. It was bigger than any drone I'd ever seen, more like the size of a small plane, maybe even larger. The shape was oval with smooth edges, no lights or markings. Street lights illuminated its bottom, letting me see the outline pretty clearly. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, thinking I might be imagining things or experiencing a weird light trick, but it didn't go away. I went inside to get my phone and take a picture. The moment I stepped off the porch, it vanished without warning, just gone. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who saw it that night. The next morning, I talked to a couple of neighbors, Karen from across the street and Mike down the road, and they'd seen the same thing. Karen was walking her dog when she looked up and saw it hovering motionless and silent. Mike was grilling in his backyard and noticed it too. We all agreed on the size and shape, but the weird part was that none of us heard anything. No engines, no wind disturbance, nothing. Nobody could explain why it just disappeared when I went inside. I checked online and called the local airport. There were no flight logs or reports of any aircraft in the area at that time. No helicopters, no planes, no drones. The stars seemed to stop shifting once I was closer to the lights. Or maybe I just stopped noticing. I wasn't sure. When I got back to my car, the normal night sounds of the highway and distant cars felt loud. I checked the sky one last time before going in. The stars were where they were supposed to be. I drove home feeling off, like I'd seen something I shouldn't have, but I couldn't say what. I've looked up at the stars a lot since then, but never saw anything like that again. Sometimes when I'm alone outside at night, I think I catch a glimpse of that slow shift again, but I'm not sure if it's real or just my mind playing tricks. Officials from the FAA and local police reported no unusual activity or calls, but soon something strange began to take shape in the neighborhood. Neighbors started talking. They described an unsettling atmosphere, a weird pressure in the air, almost like an approaching storm, but without any weather changes. Pets became anxious and restless. My own cat refused to leave the space under my bed for 2 days. I found myself growing increasingly paranoid, constantly scanning the sky, especially at night. Small, distant light flickers would catch my eye, but they never approached and remained completely silent. These glimpses felt detached, as if something was observing but deliberately avoiding detection. About a week later, late one night while pacing my porch, I noticed something odd. The streetlight flickered unexpectedly. When I looked up, hoping it was just an electrical issue, I spotted a faint glow behind the houses at the end of the cul-de-sac. This wasn't like a typical light source. It was soft and pale, almost like a hidden lantern pulsing gently behind the trees. As I watched, the glow shifted subtly, never fully revealing itself. Then the streetlight blinked off again, and when it returned, the mysterious glow had vanished. I couldn't shake the growing unease, desperately searching for a logical explanation. A few nights later, a low, persistent vibration caught my attention. It wasn't loud, but unmistakable, humming underneath the house's normal background sounds. I checked outside, but saw nothing unusual. The hum lingered for hours. The next morning, neighborhood communication revealed something remarkable. Handwritten notes appeared on doors, asking if others had experienced similar phenomena. Most responses were affirmative. The shared experiences, strange lights, unexplained hums, and large shadowy shapes, had become a collective mystery. Jim, an older neighbor, mentioned seeing similar things years ago. Back then, people kept such experiences to themselves. Now, with technology everywhere, things felt different. Yet paradoxically, no concrete evidence existed, just a collection of compelling personal stories. And I was out on a weekend hike by myself. Nothing fancy, just the usual trail I like to take near the ridge. It's quiet here. Not many people go that far, especially this time of year. I'd started in the late afternoon and was making my way up the switchbacks as the sun was dipping lower. The air was cool and still, almost too still for late spring. About halfway up, I stopped for a break near a small clearing. That's when I saw them. Dozens of birds just lying here in the dirt. Not scattered around either. They were arranged in this perfect circle like someone had placed them here on purpose. I'm not exaggerating. The circle was almost flawless. Maybe 15 feet across. All kinds of birds too. Nothing specific. Sparrows, finches, maybe a couple of crows. All just dead. I stood there staring, trying to make sense of it. No blood, no broken wings, no signs they'd been attacked. Just quiet. And the weirdest part was this fine grey dust covering their feathers. It looked like ash or maybe pollen, but it wasn't blowing around or coming from any nearby tree. It just coated them evenly, like a powder. I reached out with my glove, touched one carefully. It felt dry, almost chalky. I looked all around, thinking maybe there'd be something explaining it. A nest nearby, a predator's lair, a trap, nothing. No footprints except mine. No disturbed plants or branches, no smell of decay or fire. My heart started to speed up, but I kept telling myself to stay calm. Maybe it was some kind of weird disease outbreak or environmental thing. Still, I've hiked a lot and never seen anything like this. I pulled out my phone to take pictures, but every time I aimed at the sky, the screen would freeze or go black. I was like something was interfering with the camera, or maybe my phone just wouldn't cooperate when I needed it most. It's been a few weeks now since the first sighting, and the big shape hasn't come back. The strange glow and the humming happened less often, but the feeling that something's off never really left. I'm not sure what I saw or experienced. I can't say it was anything specific or explain what that big silent thing was, but something was here, something that didn't fit any normal pattern. The whole neighborhood talks about it now, but there's no record, no official explanation, and definitely no answers. Just a bunch of people who saw the same strange thing and don't quite know what to make of it. Notsot was unsettling that day. Something about the scene felt off from the start. The photos I took came out strange. The circle looked almost brighter than it appeared to the naked eye. Dust seemed to reflect light in an odd way. The silence struck me first. Not just quiet, but a thick, heavy stillness that seemed to swallow everything. No birds, no rustling leaves, no wind through the trees. Usually, even late in the day, you'd hear something, bugs, animals, the natural sounds of the forest. But this was different. The forest had stopped breathing. As I moved back down the trail, I kept glancing over my shoulder. An uncomfortable feeling of being watched crept over me. Each time I looked back, nothing was there. No movement, no eyes in the underbrush. Just me and the darkening woods. Back at my car, I examined the photos again. One showed a faint, almost circular blur above the trees, like a shadow or haze, but I couldn't make out what it was. Zooming in and adjusting the contrast didn't help. When I told friends about it, they brushed it off as a weird natural event or some kind of prank. A week later, I returned to the spot. The circle was gone. Just a normal forest floor with no sign anything unusual had happened. It was like the entire experience had been erased. I keep turning it over in my mind. The circle, the dust, that impossible silence. None of it makes sense. I'm not sure what I encountered that day, and part of me doesn't want to know. Later, during a routine training flight over the desert, something equally strange occurred. Just me and my co-pilot in the cockpit, a typical flight we'd done countless times before. About halfway through, I noticed some lights in the distance near the horizon. At first, I thought they might be other aircraft or helicopters flying in formation. But the desert doesn't see much traffic after dark, and these lights moved in a way that didn't match anything normal. I pointed them out to my co-pilot. "You see that?" The lights were small but distinct, 5 or 6 dots in a perfectly even line, moving steadily. What caught my attention was how precisely they kept pace with our aircraft. We were flying when the lights appeared, climbing and matching our speed exactly. They stayed a steady 3 or 4 miles behind us, maintaining perfect formation. Something felt off, so I grabbed my binoculars for a closer look. The lights were strange, solid and constant, without any blinking navigation markers. They didn't resemble anything from my training or radar experience. I tried checking with my crew over the radio, but got no response. Complete silence hung in the darkening sky. These lights seemed almost hypnotic, tracking our every move as if somehow attached to us. No matter what maneuvers we tried, they followed precisely. A weird tension built up, like someone was watching us intently. My co-pilot eventually looked through his own binoculars, scanning where I'd seen the lights. After a brief moment, he shook his head and said flatly, "I don't see anything." This confused me. The lights were crystal clear to me. When I looked again with my naked eye, they had vanished completely, gone without a trace, as if they'd never existed. I asked my co-pilot to look again, but he just stared into the empty sky. No glow, no points of light, nothing. A cold rush swept through me. How could I be seeing something he couldn't? We continued circling, searching for any sign, but found no evidence. No other aircraft, no sounds, nothing on the radar. During the debrief, describing the experience felt ridiculous, even to me. My co-pilot never mentioned a word. I wondered if he was exhausted or experiencing some kind of lapse. But those lights haunted me. How they followed us so precisely, then disappeared the moment they were noticed. I couldn't explain it. This wasn't a visual trick or glitch, at least not for me. Something out there had matched our movements perfectly before vanishing. I flew many missions after that, but never encountered anything similar again. Around 2:40 in the morning, I was still awake, watching TV in the living room. The screen glowed softly, the volume low, and my dog snored next to me on the couch. It was that eerily quiet time of night when everything seems still. Something caught my attention, maybe a ranger or another camper searching for something. I checked my phone. Just after 2 a.m. I figured I'd investigate to see if someone needed help. When I unzipped the tent and looked out, the beam of light suddenly stopped, vanishing like someone had flipped a switch. The forest fell silent, save for the usual night sounds, an owl hooting in the distance, leaves rustling in the breeze. But something didn't feel right. I stayed still, listening intently, trying to understand where those lights could have come from. The sky was clear, stars shining, no moon to cause any reflection. Back inside the tent I lay down, but my heart raced. A low, intermittent hum buzzed like electricity, coming and going. At one point, I thought I heard soft, slow footsteps nearby. Shining my flashlight outside revealed nothing, no animals, no people. I was alone, or so I thought. After about 10 minutes, the lights returned, but differently this time. Instead of sweeping over trees, they moved in sharp, deliberate patterns, scanning specific spots. The beams crisscrossed, paused, and moved again. So silent was the moment that I could hear blood rushing in my ears. A creeping sensation of being watched overwhelmed me, not just by whatever was creating the lights, but as if someone or something stood just beyond the tree line, observing me. I zipped the tent closed and pressed against the wall. Flashlight clutched tightly, trying to calm down. My phone showed no signal, no messages. When I tried calling out, my voice simply disappeared into the night. The beam stopped again, but this time the hum remained low and steady. Checking my watch, I realized an hour had passed since first seeing the lights, though it felt like mere minutes. Time seemed strange out here. At one point, I felt the tent shake, like a gentle tap on the fabric, then just a faint rustling in the leaves right outside. After waiting a few more minutes, I slowly unzipped the tent again. Nothing. No footprints, no broken branches. The beams were gone, and the hum had faded. Before dawn, I quietly packed up and left. No one else was around. Just me, the empty forest, and the unsettling feeling that whatever was out there wasn't finished watching. The neighborhood felt frozen, silent. A soft plastic click broke the stillness. The motion light beside my living room window had switched on. Its cold blue-white glow cast an unnatural sheen across the yard, making everything look slightly off. I initially thought it might be a raccoon or a neighbor's cat. Common occurrences. Seconds later, the porch floodlight spilled across the driveway, not motion-triggered, but manually switched. Then the garage motion sensor activated, illuminating my car's side. Suddenly, lights began spreading. The neighbor's yard, then the house across the street, one after another. Each motion light turned on in sequence, like a wave moving down the block. There was a deliberate pause between each activation, roughly a second, suggesting something was methodically passing house by house. Yet from my windows, I saw nothing. No movement, no shadows, just empty front lawns bathed in harsh artificial light. My dog sensed something was wrong. He lifted his head and released a low, uneasy grumble. Not a bark, but that distinctive growl he makes when someone approaches too closely. I muted the TV and listened intently. Living in a cul-de-sac meant no through traffic, just the same 10 houses. Most, like mine, had security cameras. I remained motionless, scanning the street, searching for any explanation for the synchronized light show. No cars, no wind. The trees stood perfectly still. Then, as systematically as they turned on, the lights began switching off. First mine, then the garage, followed by neighbors, then across the street, one by one, as if something had traveled down the block and was now returning. My dog approached the window, staring out with his tail down, utterly silent. When the last light clicked off, darkness felt different, deeper, more oppressive. Street lights remained, but they appeared dimmer, distant, as if the entire scene had subtly shifted. Cautiously, I checked through the peephole. Nothing. No one. The street was dead silent. Something had happened, but I couldn't explain what. There I was in the dark, uncertain whether to wake anyone up. My brother was staying with me for a few days, sleeping in the guest room at the back of the house. I lived alone and didn't want to startle him if it was nothing. So I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera app. Motion events were logged, all spaced about 5 seconds apart, matching exactly when the lights went on. I tapped the first clip and watched carefully. Nothing unusual, just the car, the yard, still bushes, no movement at all. I scrubbed through the entire 10-second clip, only the garage light flickering on and staying lit. No bugs, no swaying branches, not even a breeze. The next clip showed the same pattern. Light comes on, complete stillness, then clicks off. I opened the live camera feed and watched through the window. Everything matched perfectly. Empty driveway, nothing moving, nothing strange. Sleep was impossible that night. I stayed in the living room with lights off, camera app open. My dog sat by the door the entire time, ears up, staring at seemingly nothing. The next morning, I asked my neighbor Ed, a retired guy, nice enough, if his camera caught anything weird. He mentioned getting multiple alerts, but when he checked, the videos were blank. That night I kept the porch light on and left the blinds open. Nothing happened. But the following night, around the same time, the lights did it again. Same order, same slow chain reaction down the block. This time, I recorded it from inside, capturing the window view. You could see lights clicking on one after another. Yet when I checked the driveway footage, still nothing. No shadows, no raccoons, no bugs, just empty yards lighting up inexplicably. This happened 3 more times that week, always between 2:40 and 2:50 a.m., always in the same sequence, then back again. Then it stopped completely. But occasionally I'll wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I saw a flash through the window, like one of those lights came on again. When I check, there's nothing, just darkness and my dog staring at the front door. I was out near the Mojave, a few miles north of Joshua Tree, trying to capture long exposures of the night sky. It was past midnight, and I was alone. Solo desert trips were nothing new for me. I've done this many times. I enjoy the quiet, the isolation. Bring enough water, know your bearings, and it's fine. The sky is usually perfect out here, no light pollution, no noise. And I'd been out photographing for maybe 40 minutes in this completely still landscape. No wind, no bugs, just dry, quiet air. I was parked on a flat stretch off a dirt road, facing east near where the land drops into a shallow wash, about an hour from the main highway. My setup was standard, tripod, wide lens, 10-second shutter. During my usual rhythm of shooting and checking photos, something odd caught my attention. A bright dot appeared in the upper left corner of one image that hadn't been there before. At first, I thought it might be a plane emerging from the horizon, but when I looked up, nothing was visible. Another shot revealed the dot again, this time in a slightly different spot. It wasn't like a plane's trailing light, just a pin-sharp, blindingly bright point, too steady, no twinkling. I initially assumed it was a satellite, waiting for it to drift as they typically do, but it didn't move. Instead, it began slowly getting larger. Not glowing or pulsing, just physically expanding, still perfectly round and white, but incrementally bigger. I tried convincing myself it was an optical illusion or rising through a thin cloud layer, but the sky remained completely clear. When the next photo's exposure ended, the light was centered directly overhead, yet invisible when I looked up. I stepped back, scanning the sky. Nothing but stars and darkness. Then it reappeared, faint at first, off to the eastern edge where I'd originally spotted it. No flashy movements, just a steady, purposeful approach. Its trajectory was unnervingly direct. The angle remained constant, with the dot growing slightly larger every few seconds. Total silence surrounded me. No ambient sounds, no rustling, nothing except dry air and this tiny advancing point of light. A strange sensation filled my chest, not quite panic, but a profound feeling of exposure. I suddenly realized how isolated I was. The truck sat maybe 60 yards behind me, its shape barely visible in the moonlight, yet feeling impossibly distant. I packed my camera quickly but deliberately, careful not to turn my back on the sky. Each glance revealed the light growing incrementally larger, its approach steady and seemingly intentional. By the time I packed up the camera, what I'd seen was maybe the size of a marble, held at arm's length. It didn't sound big, but something felt off. This white dot against the blackness hung too still to be normal. I stood frozen, unsure what to do. The light hovered a few degrees above the mountain horizon, perfectly motionless. No flickering, no swaying, no color changes, just existing. I must have watched it for 3 or 4 minutes, completely still. Then, suddenly, it vanished. Not like it zipped away or blinked out. One breath it was there, the next it was gone. I blinked hard, scanning the sky, trying to catch where it might have moved. Nothing was there. I started rationalizing. Maybe I was tired. Perhaps it was a satellite with a weird light angle or some camera artifact. But when I checked the truck's camera screen, the last photo I'd taken before packing up showed it clearly, bright, centered, slightly blurred from motion. That's when things got stranger. My truck's clock was off by almost 40 minutes. Earlier that day, in 29 Palms, I'd synced it to my phone. My phone was in airplane mode, but when I checked, the times didn't match my watch or the truck clock. None showed the right time. This discrepancy unsettled me more than anything else. I drove back toward town slowly, occasionally pulling over to scan the sky, but the light never reappeared. Everything looked normal. Planes, stars, the moon. Later, when I transferred the photos to my laptop, the metadata was blank. No timestamp, no exposure data, just empty fields. I'd never seen anything like it. The files and images were there, but it was as if the camera had no record of when or how they were taken. The rest of the trip was uneventful. No more lights, no more timing issues. I just drove home the next day. I still have the photos. They look like standard star shots, except for that one series, a perfect dot, steady arc from east to center frame, then gone. I haven't camped alone since. This happened in the field behind my parents' place, out in the middle of nowhere. That Saturday night around 10:30, I'd gone out with a blanket and thermos to lie in the grass and look at the stars. Where I live now, the light pollution blocks most of the night sky, but out here, everything is visible. The night was cool and clear, with barely any wind. I spread my blanket and lay flat on my back, zoning out while watching the sky. Orion appeared first, then I spotted the Pleiades and Cassiopeia, tracing their familiar shapes. Nothing seemed unusual. After about 15 or 20 minutes, I noticed a tight group of lights near the Big Dipper, maybe 6 or 7 of them, faint like stars you'd only see in complete darkness. What caught my attention was their spacing, not perfectly linear, but arranged in a way that felt intentional, almost like an incomplete constellation. Initially, I thought it might be an unfamiliar star cluster or satellite formation, but something felt different. These lights weren't moving like satellites or planes. They didn't blink or streak. Instead, they hovered in formation, then began to shift slowly independently. Each light drifted at slightly different angles, so subtly that movement was barely perceptible unless you looked away and back again. Over 2 minutes, they gradually separated into 2 distinct groups. 3 lights remained clustered together while others spread wider. That's when I realized the field had gone completely silent. Normally, nights here buzz with crickets, tree frogs, maybe distant coyotes, but now, nothing. Not that I'd tuned it out. The sound had simply stopped. The air felt strange too, heavy with an undefined pressure. Not cold, not hot, just different. Almost instinctively, I took a step back toward the house, still watching those lights. Suddenly, they started moving faster. The night was quiet, with a peculiar display unfolding overhead. Lights moved with an eerie, deliberate glide. They weren't stars, that was clear. Stars don't break formation like this. One light separated completely, tracing a long, curved arc across the sky that seemed purposeful. Something caught my eye in the periphery, a quick white-blue flash near the tree line behind the barn, not in the sky, but on the ground or just above it. Brief, maybe half a second, yet bright enough to illuminate the treetops before darkness returned. I stood motionless, hands in my pockets, heart racing, staring into the woods, waiting for another flash. Nothing came. When I looked back, the lights had vanished entirely. No trace remained, just ordinary stars filling the sky. Grabbing my blanket and thermos, I started walking toward the house. My damp shoes made loud footsteps in the absolute silence. Halfway to the porch, a strange sound caught my attention, a low, rhythmic clicking, not mechanical, more like a rapid tongue click. It came from the direction of the trees. I turned, squinting toward the barn, pitch black beyond the fence. The clicking continued. 3 clicks, a pause, 3 more clicks, then silence. A single long snap followed. Then the porch light behind me switched off. The light I knew was on when I'd left. Inside, the windows were dark. The front room light was off too. I wondered if the power had gone out, but the refrigerator hummed normally. Flipping the porch switch produced nothing. Then, inexplicably, the light blinked on by itself. I didn't go back outside. I locked both doors and sat in the kitchen, drinking water, trying to make sense of what had happened. The next morning, my dad asked if I'd unplugged something. The night before, I noticed something strange with the router, but when my neighbor mentioned the internet being out for about 20 minutes and the microwave clock resetting, I was skeptical. He didn't think the power had gone out, and all the breakers were fine. I shared a bit about the lights moving and the clicking, but left out the details about the porch light and the flash by the woods. He dismissed my concern, suggesting I might have seen drones, but I know drones. I've flown them before, and these weren't like any drone I'd seen. They don't move that way or create such an eerie silence. Around 6 o'clock that morning, I woke up without reason. The world was grey and still, no wind, no rain. Looking out the bedroom window, I saw the yard full of birds. At first, I thought they were feeding or resting, lots of small black feathered birds, maybe starlings, but something felt off about their positioning. Curious, I went outside in my slippers thinking maybe a bird feeder had spilled. But as I got closer, I realized they weren't moving. Not a single one. 50 or 60 birds, dead, lying in a perfect ring about 15 feet across. Wings tucked in, as if asleep. No birds in the center, none outside the circle. I stood there bewildered. No feathers scattered, no blood, no sign of predators. The birds looked completely intact. Some had slightly open beaks, but most didn't. It was as if they'd simply dropped from the sky and landed precisely. I didn't touch them. Instead, I took photos with my phone and went back inside to make coffee. Who do you even call for something like this? Animal control, a local vet. My neighborhood is just a few houses along a county road. No HOA, no town office. I sat with the mystery for a while. Later, wearing gloves, I used a trash bag to collect the birds, not wanting to attract coyotes. They were stiff, as if dead for ages, though the night hadn't been cold. The ground was dry. no smell. I buried them in a shallow pit behind the shed. That afternoon I did what I usually do, flew my drone. It's my hobby. Now I enjoy filming the woods on my property. Though it's not a professional endeavor, my DJI drone with its 4K camera lets me capture some great aerial views. During one flight, I did a wide slow pan about 300 feet up, covering the yard and surrounding tree line, something I've done countless times before. The flight seemed completely normal, with no connection issues or wind to speak of. After landing, I pulled the footage to edit and noticed something unusual. A single bright pixel sat motionless in the sky portion of the frame, positioned slightly left of center. It was tiny but sharp and pure white. This pixel didn't move during the drone's turns, climbs, or drops. It remained fixed in exactly the same spot in every frame. I ruled out typical camera artifacts. It wasn't lens dust, lens flare, or a star. The day was overcast with no sunspots or light leaks. I thought it might be a stuck camera sensor pixel, but it only appeared in this specific video. Checking the next day's footage from the same flight path revealed nothing. No outline, no movement, no flicker. The speck didn't react to light changes. That night, I sat on the back step with a flashlight, watching the yard where birds had been earlier. I half expected something to return, more birds, perhaps a fox. But everything was unnaturally quiet. No insects, no wind. The trees were completely still, as if time had stopped. Then I heard the hum. It was barely perceptible, like the background vibration near a power station, except this sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Turning in a full circle, I tried to locate its source, but it felt ambient, hanging in the air around me. It wasn't loud, didn't fade in or out, just a steady, low electric tone just beyond hearing range. My chest buzzed more than my ears picked up the sound. After about 3 minutes, it stopped. No gradual fade, just sudden silence. A single dog bark broke the moment. The next morning, I checked the drone thoroughly. I wanted to verify the battery and logs. Everything appeared normal, but the flight app showed a strange data gap around the 3-minute mark, a blank spot in the telemetry data. No wind, no birds, just the soft splash of my oars as I rowed out past the shore. I'd been out on the lake before dawn, doing what I always do, trying to get a few hours of fishing before the sun came up. This was my kind of peace, the quiet that only comes from being out on the water before the world wakes. My little boat might not be fancy, but it was reliable. An old thing with a small motor and a basic fish finder that usually did the job. I switched on the sonar to check the bottom, expecting the typical little blips or clusters. Nothing exciting, but this morning was different. The screen lit up with something unusual, a big shape, slow-moving, hovering just below the surface around 50 or 60 feet down. This wasn't like the usual fish or logs. It was huge. The sonar beeped softly each time the pulse hit it, and this thing remained there for several beeps, moving just a few feet every few seconds, steady, slow. I blinked and rubbed my eyes. Maybe a glitch. I fiddled with the settings, zooming in and out, adjusting sensitivity. But the shape stayed put, moving along the same path, as if following something or just drifting. Curious, I turned the boat slowly, trying to get closer. The sun hadn't broken the horizon, so the water was dark and murky. I couldn't see anything with my eyes. As I edged toward the object, the sonar reading started to fade. The blip got smaller, less defined, then vanished altogether. I moved a little more, trying to follow where it should be, but the screen went blank. It was like the thing had disappeared. No trace left. Later that week, I flew the drone again. Same path, same time of day. No pixels, no glitches, everything normal. Except now the birds avoid that patch of yard. They're still in the trees and at the feeder, but they don't land here anymore. Not even once. It's just empty. Earlier, something strange had happened mid-flight. Altitude, heading. Everything flatlined for about 6 seconds. Then it picked back up like nothing happened. I tried to replicate it, but couldn't. That afternoon, I called the neighbor with the dog, just to ask if they'd noticed anything strange. I didn't mention the birds. I just asked about power blips or odd sounds. She said no, but then she asked if I'd seen the lights. I said no, and she dropped it, wouldn't explain. I headed back to shore as the sky began to lighten. Birds were waking up and calling from the trees. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see something, but there was nothing unusual, just the usual fog rising off the water and soft ripples against the hull. Later that day, I shared my experience with local fishermen. They shrugged it off, suggesting it could be schools of fish, big logs, or simple sonar interference. But I knew what I'd seen wasn't normal. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the morning in my head. The shape hadn't behaved like anything I'd encountered before. It didn't dart like a fish, sink to the bottom, or break apart like debris. Instead, it moved slowly and disappeared whenever I tried to get close. The next morning, I returned to the same spot at the same time. The sonar was quiet at first. Then the big shape appeared again, moving slowly across the screen. I approached carefully this time, not wanting to startle whatever it was, but just like before, it vanished as I got near. I attempted to record the sonar screen with my phone, though the early light made reflection difficult. I kept the video anyway, hoping someone might later review it for proof. That day the lake felt different. The usual sounds of water and wildlife were present, but a strange silence hung in the air, like the place was holding its breath. While fishing, I continually scanned my surroundings, half expecting to catch a glimpse of something in the water or sky. A few times I thought I saw ripples appear from nowhere, but when I looked closer, the water remained still, with no boats or fish nearby. As the sun climbed higher, the normal day crowd arrived: kayakers, jet skis, families on the shore. The lake's usual noise returned, yet I felt somehow displaced, as if I'd been somewhere else entirely. That night, I reviewed the video on my phone. The shape wasn't clear, just a blurry shadow on the sonar screen. But it was definitely there, moving slow and steady. What it was, I still don't know. Something big, something alive, or perhaps something else entirely. It haunts me, this quiet mystery beneath the waves, a shape drifting just out of reach. Was it real, or just a glitch, a trick of the sonar? I keep wondering if I ever see it again. My walk home is usually about 3 miles from my friend's place, a routine route I take to clear my head after a long day. The streets are mostly quiet, with sparse streetlights and empty roads. Nothing seems sketchy. I typically listen to music on my phone, checking messages occasionally. About halfway through my walk, something strange started happening with my phone signal. It wasn't like being in a remote area with poor reception. Instead, the signal would flicker off and on precisely at the same spot, a corner bordering an empty field. At first, I dismissed it as a coincidence or cell tower issue. The field looked ordinary, just grass and scrubby bushes. But on the horizon, there was this faint, almost imperceptible bluish glow. Not like any street light or artificial source I'd seen before in this rural area. Every time I passed that spot, my phone signal would drop right as I looked toward the glow, returning a minute later once I'd moved away. I tested this multiple times. The first night, I thought it might be a fluke. The second night, I deliberately took a different route but still passed near the same location. The result was identical. Signal dropped, that barely noticeable glow present. Something about it made me uneasy. Not panic, but a sense that my brain was trying to understand something just beyond comprehension. It didn't want to be found. It moved quietly beneath the surface, vanishing whenever I got close. Silent and elusive. Silent and elusive. I was walking past the field, completely confused by what was happening. Something strange was going on. There was nothing logical that could explain it. No towers, no electronic interference nearby, just pure weirdness. One night I decided to stop and observe. Leaning against a tree at the field's edge, I stared toward the horizon. The glow was steady and soft, unlike anything I'd seen in that area before. It wasn't moving or flickering, just hanging there persistently. My phone sat on the ground beside me, and the signal bars vanished. No calls, no texts, no data. When I looked back up, I noticed a very low hum after a few minutes. It wasn't loud or constant, more like a faint vibration in the air. It reminded me of the sound near power lines, except no power lines were anywhere close. It almost felt like the sound was emanating from the field itself. Something felt different, not like someone was standing behind me, but as if something was aware of my presence. I slowly turned and scanned the area. An empty road stretched out, no cars or people, just the night and occasional leaf rustling. As I started walking again, the hum faded. My signal returned once I passed the corner. I tried convincing myself it was all in my head, but I knew it wasn't. It wasn't just the light or drop signal, it was the feeling of being somewhere something didn't belong, or something was hiding just out of sight. The next night, I brought a friend to investigate. When we arrived, my phone died again, but my friend's phone maintained signal, which was strange. We both looked toward the glow. My friend suggested it might be a campfire or distant farm light, but when I mentioned the signal dropping only for me, they shrugged it off. We stayed a few minutes, and the low hum returned. My friend either didn't hear it or didn't acknowledge it. I could tell they thought I was a bit crazy. Maybe I was. After that, I avoided walking that route alone, but sometimes I had no choice. Each time, the same pattern repeated: signal loss, the glow, the hum. Then one night, walking back alone, I saw something move in the field. Not a person or animal, but a dark shape shifting beyond the bushes. I stopped and stared. The glow was brighter that night, but still unexplained. My phone died suddenly, leaving me in an unfamiliar darkness. A heavy weight pressed down on the air around me, making me feel cold despite the temperature. My heart racing, I started walking fast without looking back. When I reached home, I checked my phone. The signal had returned to normal. I haven't gone back to that spot since, but on quiet nights, a faint blue glow sometimes appears far off near the horizon. I'm uncertain what I witnessed or why my phone behaved so strangely. Something about that location feels off, like there's something hidden that doesn't want to be seen too closely. Somehow, it targeted only me, which is why the experience continues to haunt me. I didn't intend to become obsessed with the security footage. It just happened after the first weird encounter. I'd installed basic cameras around my house years ago, mostly for peace of mind. Typically, they'd catch occasional wildlife, raccoons or cats passing through. About a month ago, I noticed a low, dark shape at the edge of one camera's view, always appearing precisely at 3 a.m. Initially, I thought it might be a glitch or a streetlight shadow. The shape lingered on the far right frame, barely visible, almost slipping in and out of view. It didn't move much, just hovered silently. I didn't think much of it until seeing it again the next night, at the same time, same place. I reviewed footage from previous nights and discovered it had been there every night for about 3 weeks, always at 3 a.m. Sometimes the shape would stretch longer, other times appear shorter, but never fully entering the frame. I live alone on the town's edge, a quiet area with only street and porch lights breaking the darkness. The surrounding landscape is nothing but dark trees and grass. During those nights I heard no strange noises, no footsteps, no voices. What unnerved me most was its precision, like something was following a preset timer. The shape would stay low, close to the ground, right at the camera's edge, for exactly a few minutes before vanishing into shadows. I couldn't identify what it was. It wasn't human, no arms or legs were visible. I kept seeing this dark shape on my security camera, always at the exact same time. 3 a.m., the footage was crystal clear, but something felt off. One night I decided to catch it in person. I set my alarm for 2:50 a.m. and sat by the window with curtains pulled back, watching intently. When 3 a.m. came, nothing happened. No shape, no shadow, just the streetlight illuminating the area as always. The only difference was me sitting there, half expecting something to appear. The next morning I checked the footage again, and there it was, that same dark shape, as if it had been present the entire time. This was the first moment it really got under my skin. How could something be visible on camera but completely invisible to me just feet away? After that, I started, sleeping with blinds closed and lights on, but the shape kept showing up, always at 3 a.m., always in the same spot. A few nights later, heard a strange noise outside. It was a low, faint humming, almost like a vibration in the air, that lasted maybe 10 seconds. I froze, listening carefully. When I looked out the window, everything appeared normal. No lights, no movement. I couldn't determine if the sound came from inside or outside the house. That same night, the security camera captured something even more unsettling. The shape seemed to shift slightly forward, almost as if leaning or stretching toward the camera before pulling back. Watching frame by frame, I was convinced the movement was deliberate. I considered calling someone, the police, or a security company, but there was no tangible threat. Nothing was stolen, no property damage, just this weird shadowy shape that emerged every night, neither fully visible nor completely hidden. It felt like it was watching me, waiting for something. The fact that it appeared when the neighborhood was completely silent made everything more unnerving. The house felt colder at night, even with the heater running. I'd catch myself constantly looking toward the window, expecting to see it. One morning, I realized I'd lost about 30 minutes of time. I'd set an alarm for 6 a.m., but didn't remember hearing it. My mind was fuzzy, like I'd blanked out or fallen into a strange sleep. I tried to recall the moments before falling asleep, but everything was hazy. That day, I spent hours reviewing the footage, noticing subtle details I'd missed before. Every time the shape appeared, the clock on the video feed would briefly flicker and glitch, like a tiny jump or skip, just for a second. I couldn't tell if it was a camera issue or something else, but I felt connected. Sleep became a challenge. Lying awake, I'd stare at the ceiling, sensing something just beyond the window. Soft noises, scratching, rustling, would catch my attention. Yet when I looked, nothing was there. The backyard remained empty, but the feeling lingered. One night, I tried putting a flashlight in the yard, aiming it toward where the shape usually showed up. The next morning, the battery was dead. I never saw what drained it, but it happened after the shape's appearance. Eventually, I stopped constantly watching the footage. It was messing with my mind. Still, I kept checking the cameras, hoping to catch something different, some clue. Nothing ever changed. The shape would emerge like clockwork at 3 a.m., staying low, lurking at the edge of the frame, never fully visible, never leaving tracks or signs outside. After a few weeks, the shape disappeared completely. No more glitches, no more strange noises. Nights returned to normal and my sleep improved. I never saw the shape with my own eyes, only on camera. I can't explain what it was or why it came around nightly. But for a while, it felt like something was watching, waiting in the dark, right at the edge of sight. This happened about 3 years ago during overnight work for the State Highway Department. We were resurfacing a 2-lane stretch near Ridgeway, miles from anywhere. It was a weeknight, probably Wednesday. Clear sky, no traffic. We worked from 9 p.m. to around 4 a.m. Most nights were dead quiet. That night was typical. Warm, dry, no wind. The moon was half full, stars sharp. Floodlights marked a quarter-mile stretch. With cones set up, I was manning the far side where crew trucks were parked, mostly directing equipment and keeping watch. Not thrilling work, but I enjoyed the quiet. Around midnight, I stepped away from the lights to relieve myself behind the equipment trailer. About 50 feet from the road, facing the trees, I noticed the absolute stillness. No bugs, no wind, not even the usual field hum, just dead quiet. As I finished, a shadow moved across the gravel near my feet. At first I thought it was clouds, but the sky was clear. I stood there for a long time, scanning the sky. Nothing moved. No birds, no planes, not even a single wisp of cloud, just stars. But the shadow was real. It wasn't fast. Instead, it glided smoothly across the road from west to east, covering the entire highway width. What struck me most was the complete silence. No noise, no wind, no vibration. I waited for something, a sound, a breeze, anything, but there was nothing. I watched it cross over the floodlight beams and disappear into the trees. Its shape was long and irregular, not round or winged, more like the outline of something huge, but not solid. A very faint, dark filter moving between me and the stars. After it passed, everything remained absolutely still. No animal stirred, no wind moved. It left nothing behind, not even a breeze. The air felt heavy somehow, not cold, just waiting. I remember checking my watch, thinking maybe 5 minutes had passed, but it had only been 1. When I walked back to the road, I asked one of the other guys if he'd seen anything. He just shrugged, suggesting I'd probably seen a bat, but it wasn't a bat. Bats don't cast shadows like that, and I know what planes sound like. This was something else entirely. About an hour later, strange things started happening. The radio clicked on briefly with just static, then shut off. We hadn't used the radios all night, and they're usually reliable. The handheld in the charger had a blank screen, as if turned off, though I hadn't touched it. Then I heard a soft metallic clank from behind the trailer, not loud, just a deliberate sound like someone dropping a wrench. I checked the entire trailer length. No one was there. Nothing had fallen. Everything was exactly where it should have been. When I returned, I noticed something odd about the gravel near where I'd seen the shadow. A narrow, straight band, maybe a foot wide, looked different from the rest. While the surrounding area was dry and dusty, this strip seemed compressed, almost melted together. I bent down to touch it. It wasn't warm, just firmer, as if the surface had been pressed down. I didn't tell anyone. Some experiences aren't easy to explain. I got back from my run around 3:10 a.m., definitely sure because I checked my phone screen as I turned the corner to my building. I'd run a bit longer than usual, trying to shake off some stress from a tough work week. The neighborhood is usually quiet and safe at night, and I'd done this running route probably 50 times before. But something felt different this time. About halfway through the run, maybe 15 or 20 minutes in, I realized something strange. Not a single car had passed by, no headlights, no street noise. Even the houses looked different. I usually run past a row of small ranch-style homes with porch lights always on, but that night, every single one was dark. I told myself I was just being paranoid and overthinking things. I put my earbuds back in and kept moving. It was one of those unnaturally still nights. No wind, no bugs, not even the usual buzz from streetlights. Everything felt flat, like a soundproof room. When I got back to my street, I immediately noticed my porch light was off. I always leave it on if I know I'll be out after dark. Earlier that week at work, I'd stayed in the truck for the rest of my shift. Door locked, radio off. The weirdest part happened on the drive home. I finished up around 4:15, got in my truck, and started heading south on Route 12, which runs through open farmland. Just as I was coming up over a low hill, maybe 10 minutes from the site, my headlights picked up something on the left side of the road. It was a shape, tall, thin, not moving. I slowed down, thinking it might be a deer or a person. As I got closer, I realized it was neither. It looked like a narrow post or figure, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall, standing just inside the ditch. I passed it slowly, around 20 miles per hour, trying to get a better look without stopping. I didn't move. I only saw it for about 3 seconds, but I couldn't make out any details. Just a tall, vertical shape, dull gray, with no shine or reflection. I checked my rearview mirror, but the road behind me was empty. Nothing was standing there anymore. That stretch of road has no turn-offs, no fences, nowhere something could hide. I drove home the rest of the way with the windows up and the radio off. The next day, I went back to the site around noon, just to see if the gravel looked weird. It didn't. The whole area looked normal, like nothing had happened. The radio in the truck worked fine too. I didn't bring it up again with the crew. Nothing else weird happened that week, but I stopped volunteering for the Ridgeway shift after that. The light bulb died, which wasn't unusual. But when I saw the front door, something felt off. It was open, just a couple of inches, enough to glimpse the edge of the hallway wall. I always lock my door, even for a quick trip to the corner store. I'm alone, and I'm careful. Standing on the sidewalk, no lights were on inside, and complete silence hung in the air. I pulled out my earbuds and approached slowly, trying to recall if I might have forgotten to lock up. But I knew I had. I always check. Instead of rushing in, I leaned close and whispered, "Hello." Silence answered, using my knuckle. I nudged the door open just enough to peek inside. Initially, everything looked normal. Shoes by the mat, jacket on its hook. My heart raced as I stepped in and reached for the light switch. I flipped it. Nothing. The darkness was absolute. I checked my phone. The screen lit up clearly, showing 3:10. Using its flashlight, I moved through each room methodically. No signs of a break-in. Nothing seemed disturbed. That's when I noticed the microwave clock, 2:36. At first, I didn't think much of it. Probably a power flicker. But the stove showed the same time. In the bedroom, the alarm clock was frozen at 2:36, not blinking like a reset, just suspended. My phone now read 3:14, a 40-minute difference. I stared, comparing screens and clocks. I turned the microwave off and on. Nothing changed. Time remained stuck. I opened the clock app and placed my phone next to the stove. The phone ticked forward. The stove stayed frozen. I tried turning on lights. unplugging and replugging lamps. Dead. The outlets weren't working, yet my phone battery stayed at 75% with full cell signal. Returning to the front door, still cracked open, porch light off, I stepped back inside. A faint, irregular mechanical ticking caught my attention. Not like a clock, but mechanical. I followed the sound, wondering if something was stuck in the fan or if the fridge compressor was failing. I stood outside the door for a long time, phone in hand, when the sound suddenly stopped. As soon as I touched the doorknob, everything went silent. Opening the door revealed an empty space. Just coats, a vacuum cleaner, everything as usual. Nothing that could have made a sound. After shutting the door, I stood there for a moment. Then, without warning, every light in the apartment flicked on at once, bright and sudden with no warm-up. The clocks remained frozen. Checking my phone, it was 3:23. Back in the kitchen, I tried turning on the TV. It worked. The fridge hummed, the ceiling fan spun, but the clock stayed stuck. I manually set the suck microwave just to check. It worked fine, as did the oven clock and the one in the bedroom. They all started keeping time again once reset, after that weird freeze at 2:36. I kept glancing at the hallway closet, expecting to hear that ticking again. The next morning, I checked the breaker panel. Nothing tripped. I called the building manager, who confirmed no maintenance had been done. I still don't understand how the door opened, or why the clocks froze while everything else had power. It was an electrical mystery I'd never experienced before or since. There was one other thing I barely noticed at the time, a smudge on the inside of the front door, about chest height. It looked like someone had pressed their hand, palm out, leaving a faint outline. I wiped it off the next day. The humming began when I was about 3 miles into the loop trail, just past 5 in the morning. The sky was that deep early blue, still mostly dark. I hike this trail monthly to clear my head before work, and I rarely encounter others, especially at this hour. The trail winds through forest for the first mile, then opens to a ridge overlooking the valley. I'd stopped at the overlook, had some water, and continued. It was cold enough to see my breath, but not uncomfortable. Everything felt normal until the sound started. Low and almost more of a vibration than a sound, like standing near a big transformer or idling diesel engine, except there was no obvious source, no cars, no planes, not coming from the ground, but seemingly suspended in the air around me. I paused, looking around, trying to understand. The generator's hum was constant, or maybe it wasn't. It pulsed slowly 3 or 4 seconds on, then a couple off, then back on. My phone showed 1 bar with no data as I checked the signal. I stepped off the trail, trying to understand the source of the sound. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. I turned in a slow circle, listening. After a couple minutes, something moved in the trees to my right. At first, I thought it was a person moving so smoothly. But it was a deer, big, about 30 yards away. I froze. Yet the deer didn't bolt like deer normally do. It stood completely still, legs stiff, ears up, not switching or blinking. Its gaze was fixed on something above the tree line over the ridge I had just come from. Not toward me, not toward the trail. Up. That's when I realized how quiet everything had become. No wind, no birds, no squirrels. Just the pulsing hum and this motionless deer staring upward. I looked up too, expecting maybe a drone or plane, but the sky was empty, just stars and the faint blue of approaching dawn. The treetops were still. Nothing moved. The deer didn't look away. I swear it didn't even blink. I watched, waiting for some movement. Run, turn its head, flick its tail, but nothing happened. This frozen posture began to unsettle me more than the humming. Eventually, I backed away slowly and continued walking. The trail curved back into the woods. I tried to shake off the strange encounter. Maybe the deer was sick. Maybe a high-altitude plane was causing the sound. I kept moving, but now hyper-aware of every surrounding noise. About 10 minutes later, I reached a small clearing where the trees thinned near a rocky slope. A signpost with trail markers stood there, my usual resting spot before the final leg of the journey. As I entered the clearing, the humming intensified, not painfully loud but dense enough to feel in my chest, the kind of low sound that tightens your stomach. Then the shadows shifted. That's the only way I can describe it. How the early light filtering through the trees cast long, strange shadows. I crossed the clearing, moving as usual, but something was different. The silence felt unnatural. A massive, invisible shape seemed to pass between the sky and the clearing, causing the light to shift subtly. No wind, no movement. I looked up repeatedly, seeing nothing. Suddenly, the sound vanished completely, as if someone had abruptly muted the world. I stood frozen, my ears experiencing a strange pressure, similar to what you feel in an elevator. Then came footsteps. Fast. Crunching on gravel, I whirled around, but the path behind me was empty. The sound didn't repeat. The ear pressure lingered briefly before returning to normal. I considered turning back, but decided to continue. My pace quickened, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, increasingly uncomfortable with the solitude. Approaching the final bend before descending, I encountered another clearing. A fallen pine had opened the forest canopy. There, I spotted what I initially thought was a deer, positioned about 40 feet away. But something was wrong. Its posture was bizarre. Crouched low, belly almost touching the ground, legs bent at unnatural angles. The head remained upright, staring directly skyward. Its limbs looked too long, joints seemingly bent in impossible directions. The longer I observed, the less certain I became that it was actually a deer. The sound returned louder this time, a low humming pulse overlaid with static-like interference. I moved quickly, not quite running, until I could see the trailhead parking lot through the trees. My car was the only vehicle present. Back in the lot, normal morning sounds resumed. Wind rustling trees, distant bird calls. The sun had fully risen, the sky appearing completely ordinary. I sat in the car for a while, watching the tree line. Nothing followed me. During the drive home, I continuously checked my rearview mirror. That night, I had gone out behind the cabin because the sky was clearer than it had been in years. No moon, no haze. The cold, sharp stars stretched across the entire sky at my uncle's remote cabin in northern Arizona. This was no fancy place, just a single room, a fire pit, and a deck overlooking the distant hills. No neighbors, no cell signal, barely enough power to keep a phone charged. I'd been here a couple of days with my tripod and camera. Night photography had become my recent hobby, mostly long exposures, capturing star landscapes and tree lines. Nothing serious, just something I enjoyed. That night, around 11:30, I bundled up in 2 jackets, set up my equipment, and started my shoot. A thermos of something warm and soft music played from a Bluetooth speaker. The temperature was well below freezing, but I barely noticed. Just after 1 a.m., something unusual caught my eye in the southeastern sky. A cluster of pale, dim lights, maybe 6 or 7, hung motionless. They weren't stars, weren't blinking, and definitely too high to be aircraft or satellites. At first, they seemed completely stationary, but as I watched more closely, I realized they were moving incredibly slowly. To verify I wasn't imagining things, I started a time-lapse sequence. Over the next 1015 minutes, I watched something extraordinary unfold. These lights weren't moving like typical celestial objects. They weren't rotating in an arc or flying in a straight line. Instead, they shifted positions like points on a grid being subtly rearranged. 2 would drift slightly apart, while another moved toward the center, completely silent. The wind had died down, leaving only stillness and these faint, mysteriously choreographed lights. Checking my camera's playback confirmed what I was seeing, though the lights were barely visible. Something about that validation felt both exciting and unsettling. I turned off the music and watched, losing track of time. Maybe 20 minutes passed as the lights continued their slow, deliberate repositioning. Then, suddenly, one blinked out. Not faded or drifted away, just vanished. Instantly, I rubbed my eyes, certain I must have missed something. But no, it was simply gone. About a minute later, another light disappeared in the same abrupt manner. Different location, same instantaneous disappearance. Lights started vanishing from the sky, one by one. First it was one of the outer ones, then 2 more disappeared quickly, leaving just 3 remaining in a rough triangle formation. I backed away, repeatedly glancing at the camera, but the screen had gone dark. The recording had stopped, though I didn't recall the battery dying or the memory card filling up. Walking over to investigate, I found the camera was still on but frozen. The shutter hadn't closed, and the image was stuck. As I fiddled with the controls, I looked up and watched another light disappear. Now only 2 remained. Something about that moment tightened my chest, not dramatically, but with a quiet sense of wrongness. Their disappearance defied any logic I understood. They weren't falling, fading, or blinking. It was like watching pieces of sky simply cease to exist. Standing there with the camera in hand, I stared at the last 2 lights. They hung motionless, seemingly waiting. Then the 6th one vanished. The final light remained alone for what felt like an eternity. My watch had fogged over, and my phone was charging inside the cabin. I estimate it was there for 10 minutes or more. Surrounded by the absolute stillness of the forest, I watched that single faint light hanging in the sky until it too disappeared. Instead, I stayed on the deck, scanning the now normal sky, half expecting something else to occur. Nothing happened. The stars looked ordinary again, no movement, no clusters, nothing out of place. Checking the camera again, I found it unresponsive and had to remove the battery to restart it. When I finally got it working and reviewed the files, the time-lapse was mostly intact. Trees, stars, and faint clouds were visible, but the crucial moment was missing. The last few frames were corrupted, cutting off right before the first light vanished. I considered driving into town the next day to check air traffic reports or astronomy forums, but no internet connection existed up there. I ended up staying 2 more nights, seeing nothing extraordinary, just cold skies and regular stars. The camera file remains saved. Sometimes I attempt to adjust the contrast or extract more detail from those lights, but nothing significant emerges. Just pale dots, barely brighter than surrounding stars. The video simply ends. No sound, no reaction from the trees or anything else. Just silence. Too much silence. And strangely, I didn't even check the camera immediately. That was the truly odd part. I see uppy rail cams mostly out of habit. I live alone just outside of Winchester, Virginia, on a couple wooded acres quiet enough, with he near's neighbor about half a mile off, with go coyotes and he occasional bear, nothing unusual. I say 1 camera on he backside of he woods near an old game rail her cuts pars a fallen oak. I hadn't pulled he card for a few weeks, and I was February cold with no expectation of much movement. A nigh he power flickered. Due for a second away, enough a kick off he TV and writer, he rouder. When I looked out he kitchen window I noticed something odd. A pale glow ho he rees. No moving, no flickering like a fire, just his Lena-like light hair. Didn't make sense. I walked out of both the back deck buzz. He light was gone. I was around 2 a.m. and he snow was fresh, maybe an inch half fell earlier, evening. I figured I might have been headlight, bouncing weird off he rees and didn't hink much more bits. Changed when I was clearing old footage from he rail cam by he fallen oak on Sunday afternoon. A moin clip, him said, 2:03 a.m. revelled some incur, made my skin crawl. A furs I look like knowing juicy rees snow, and fain branches hen his shape defied across he frame. I couldn't call I an animal or a person. I didn't walk, run, or fly. I just moved how, no solid giving off a very soft witch blue light how seemed off flicker like here above foul. He reasly up as I passed. His wasn't a camera artifact. You could see he shadows move on he ranks. He snow glowing under eye. In less hand 2 seconds. I passed ra he frame and vanished. I replayed he clapped dozens of irons, slowing I down. Strainy or hear something. War struck me, was he dire coin. I wasn't disturbing he snow. Wasn't ouching any hind. I was moving in a stray line from left or right, and I was heading strange event olded. My house. And the strange event unfolded with a trail camera. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The camera captured a clip one night, then went silent for 2 days. Later, a fleeting squirrel appeared in daylight. I left the footage alone, not mentioning it to anyone. Something felt unsettling. A few nights later, while in the shed, I experienced an odd sensation. It wasn't exactly a noise, but more like a pressure shift, similar to the feeling when driving through a tunnel. The sensation lasted only seconds. I stepped outside. The woods were utterly silent. No wind, no owls, not even the typical tree creaks, just complete stillness. Walking to the camera's location, everything looked unchanged, same logs, same patchy snow. After standing there for a while, I returned inside. Sleep was difficult that night. The next evening, I checked the camera again. Another clip had recorded just after 2 a.m., triggered by a faint motion alert. But this recording was different. Nothing visible moved. No animals, no branches. Yet the trees lit up again with a pale light sweeping from left to right. This time, the light source remained hidden. It seemed something was moving behind the camera, casting shadows toward the lens. The motion sensor triggered, though no shape entered the frame. My stomach turned at the thought. The next day, I investigated closer to the house. Fresh snow had fallen overnight. A light dusting, not enough to completely cover tracks. No footprints were visible. The battery remained full, the lens clean. That night, I stayed vigilant. Lights off, coffee in hand, I watched the trees from the back window. Around 2:10, a faint crackling sound emerged, like twigs snapping under something lightweight. It lasted mere seconds. Stepping onto the deck, I encountered cold, still air with a faint metallic smell, reminiscent of rain on old wiring. I listened carefully until my fingers grew numb. The following morning, the trail camera was inexplicably off. I assumed the batteries had died, but upon opening the panel, they were fully charged. The memory card remained intact. When I turned it back on, everything seemed normal, yet something felt different. I was working the night shift at this remote communications outpost out in the middle of nowhere, way up in the mountains where there's barely any light pollution. My job was mostly maintenance, checking signal equipment, and just keeping an eye on the place overnight. Usually it was pretty boring, but sometimes the isolation gets to you. That night, I stepped outside around midnight to take a break. The sky was clear and full of stars. At least that's what I thought at first. I looked up, just standing there with my coffee, when I noticed something odd. The stars weren't steady. They started to move slowly at first, like the whole sky was spinning. I blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were messing with me, or I was just tired. I stared longer, trying to focus, and the movement kept going. The stars were rotating around some invisible center, and it was weirdly hypnotic. I pulled out my phone to check the time and maybe take a picture, but the screen's light suddenly felt too bright compared to the dark sky. That's when I realized it wasn't the stars moving at all. Something massive was slowly shifting in front of the sky. I couldn't see the edges clearly. It was just this enormous, dark shape blotting out the stars as it moved. No lights, no noise. Later, I set up a camera to capture anything unusual. It worked immediately, but there were no new clips. I replaced the batteries anyway and set it back up. That night, nothing. The next night, nothing. Then, 3 days later, a new video appeared. Same time, 2:03 a.m., this one had sound. I didn't think the camera even had audio. I was cheap, an older model, but this clip had faint background noise. Not much, but enough to catch something strange. A kind of low-frequency hum, barely above a whisper, like someone humming a single note under their breath. It got louder as the clip progressed. The video itself showed the same light sweeping through the trees, but again, no shape, just illumination moving from left to right. The hum peaked right as the light faded, and silence again. I brought the clip into editing software to clean it up, boost the sound. There was nothing under the hum. No animal sounds, no wind, just that steady, low tone. I checked other clips from the same day. No sound on those, not even a hint. I haven't caught anything new since then. It's been over a month. The snow's melted. I still check the camera every few days. It works. Records, squirrels, raccoons, the occasional deer, but no lights, no hum, no shapes. The woods seem normal again, but I've stopped going out here after dark. The night was silent at the outpost, miles from any town or other workers. I stood frozen as a shape glided overhead, covering more of the sky with each passing moment. Its movement felt unnatural, smooth but deliberate, almost as if it knew it was being observed. My voice caught in my throat when I tried to call out. The wind picked up, yet no sound came from the shape itself. Looking around, I saw no lights, no signs of other people. I was completely alone. As the shape passed overhead, the stars behind it simply vanished. For a moment, the sky was just an empty blackness. The air grew heavier, pressing down around me. My breath became visible, and my hands started shaking uncontrollably. I tried to use my phone, but the screen remained blank, as if the shape was blocking any electronic signal. Reluctantly, I put the phone away knowing any attempt to record this would likely fail. Just as quietly as it arrived, the shape drifted away, allowing the stars to reappear. The spinning stopped, and the sky looked normal again. But I knew something extraordinary had happened. Returning inside, I checked the security cameras around the outpost, hoping to find some evidence. Yet the feeds showed nothing unusual, just the typical empty landscape under the starry sky. I spent the rest of the night watching through the window. Nothing else occurred. When my shift ended, I left without discussing what I'd witnessed. How could I explain something so strange without sounding completely insane? Even now, I'm uncertain what I saw. It wasn't an airplane or a drone. It made no sound. The stars hadn't moved by themselves. Something huge and inexplicable had passed overhead that night. Clouds passed by, obscuring the sky before disappearing completely. I haven't returned to that outpost since that moment.